welcome back to Middle-earth. It's good to have you here again. If you've been listening for a while, you already know this is our quiet corner of Arda, a place where the fires burn low, the world slows down, and the stories feel familiar. Tonight, we'll wander through ancient forests, forgotten kingdoms, and the long shadows of the Second and Third Age. No rush, no noise, just the lore of the Lord of the Rings, told gently, like it was always meant to be heard. So, settle in. Let your mind drift to the Shire, to Rivendell, to the white towers of Minas Tirith. And together, let's return to Middle-earth. In the grey mists of the Third Age, at the far edge of the world where sea and sky blur into one vast, breathing veil, the grey havens wake to dawn. The timbers of the harbour creak, ropes sigh against ancient posts. Gulls wheel and cry in the half-light, and the air tastes of salt and cold and memory. Here Círdan stands as he has stood for ages uncounted, watching the western horizon. Oldest of all the elves remaining in Middle-earth, his beard is white, his eyes clear and grave. He listens to the lap of the waves against the stones, to the whisper of masts in the harbour, to the hidden pulse of the world itself. He has seen kingdoms rise and fall. He has watched the roads of men fade into grass. He knows that on mornings like this, fate can arrive quietly. Out beyond the breakwater, the mist thickens. It moves not with the wind, but as if it chooses its own slow path. From within that moving shroud, a shape begins to form, the pale suggestion of a prow, the faint gleam of wet, sea-dark wood. An ancient ship glides into view, its timbers older than the realms of Gondor and Arna, older than the white tree that once shone in Numenor before it fell into shadow. No sail snaps, no oar dips. The vessel comes as if the sea itself bears it, silent and sure. Figures stand upon its deck, robed and hooded, more felt than seen in the shifting light. They are heavy with distance, with long wanderings beyond the circles of this world. You can almost feel it, can't you? Even from here as we journey into the story behind the story, something is coming ashore that does not belong to any single age. Círdan's gaze passes over them one by one, weighing, measuring. Not a mere captain, not only messengers, powers in grey disguise. Yet it is the smallest of them that holds his eye. A bent figure in simple, weather-stained robes, leaning upon a staff. His hair is white, his beard long, his shoulders seem bowed by the years. To any other watcher he would be only an old man at the end of his roads. But Círdan sees deeper. In that frail shape he senses an ancient fire, a memory of the first music when the world was young. He feels the echo of battles against shadow long before the sun and moon were set in the sky. This one has known fear. This one has known flame. Why, Círdan wonders, does his heart stir with both hope and dread at the same time? The ship kisses the quay with barely a tremor. Footsteps thud softly on the planks. When the grey wanderer comes near, Círdan steps forward, and in that brief meeting of eyes the hidden centuries open between them. Without flourish, without witness, the shipwright draws forth a small, secret thing, a ring of red gold set with a stone like a captured ember. Narya, the ring of fire. Forged in their elder days, guarded through wars and drownings and the long decay of kingdoms, its flame was given to Círdan to keep hope alive among a fading people. Now, against all expectation, he lifts it from his own hand. He sees in this stranger's weary face the shape of labour's yet to come, of roads through darkness where armies will not avail. He understands in that quiet instant that the fate of Middle-earth will depend not on great hosts, but on the kindling of hearts. "Take this," he says softly, and the words seem meant for more than one pair of ears. "For you will have need of it." The ring's fire passes from elf to Maya, from an ancient mariner to an immortal spirit willingly bound in weakness. The old man's fingers close around it, and for a heartbeat the grey morning brightens, as if some unseen spark has leapt into the world. He does not boast. He does not promise victory. Instead, he accepts the burden as though he has carried such weights before. For he has. Though those around him will not know it, this is no mere wizard arriving in a quiet harbour. This is Olorin of the Maiar, who once walked in the gardens of Lorien and learned pity from Nienna, who remembers a world broken by fire and the terror of Morgoth's servants. Somewhere far beneath the mountains of Middle-earth, a forgotten Balrog lies curled in the dark, a remnant of that ancient war. And as the grey pilgrim steps ashore, bound now to age and pain and even death, some deep part of him already knows. One day, on a bridge of stone in Moria, the fire he bears will have to stand against the fire he fears. Dim the lights. Get comfortable. Tonight we uncover how that quiet step onto the quay leads, through hidden roads and long wanderings, to a fall into the abyss, and a return in greater power. The ring of fire and the weight of foresight. So let's step together into that quiet moment on the quay, when the grey pilgrim has barely set foot on Middle-earth, and another ancient power waits for him. Círdan the shipwright stands there, older than most memories, his hands calloused by centuries of crafting white ships for a road no mortal chart can show. In his palm, half hidden by his long fingers, rests a ring, Narya, the ring of fire. It is small, it is simple, yet in the sea mist light it glows like a banked coal, a deep red stone that seems to hold the memory of a forge at the heart of the world. Círdan feels its warmth against his skin, not burning, but steady, like the last ember in a dying hearth that somehow refuses to go out. Around it, the grey harbour feels a little less cold. The long weariness of the Third Age feels, for a heartbeat, less heavy. Círdan could keep it. Who would question him, this mariner of forgotten ages, who watched the fall of Valyrian and the drowning of lands most have only heard of in song? Yet he looks up at the newcomer, at this bent old man in travel-stained grey, and something in him knows. The ring does not belong with the one who waits at the shore. It belongs with the one who will walk the roads. He studies Gandalf in silence, not the way lesser lords measure a stranger, but the way one Maya gazes upon another, reading beyond the worn staff and the frayed cloak. He sees humility there, an absence of pride that sets this wanderer apart from Saruman's white splendour. He sees compassion, a tenderness for the small and the weak that will one day turn toward hobbits in a green land far away. But behind the kindness, Círdan sees something else in those grey eyes, a shadow of sorrow, as if they have watched worlds break and cities burn in ages before the sun. What battles has this spirit seen? What fires has he already fled? When Círdan closes Gandalf's hand around Narya, it is not a mere gift, it is a transfer of burden. The ring of fire was wrought to enkindle hearts, to stand against weariness, terror and despair, the very weapons that Balrogs once wielded as Morgoth's lieutenants in the First Age. Not swords, not whips of flame alone, but the power to turn courage to ash. Someone must bear a counterfire. For an instant, as gold touches skin, Gandalf's mind shivers with dreamlike flashes. Dark halls beneath mountains, choked with ancient smoke. A narrow bridge over a black chasm. A roar of fire that is not comforting but ravenous, and his own voice, flung like a challenge against the abyss. You cannot pass. Is this foresight, or only the echo of old terrors remembered from before the making of the world? He sways just slightly. Then the harbour returns, gulls, grey waves, the creak of ropes. Yet beneath it all, he feels something deeper, like a faint tremor in the bones of the earth. Far away, far below, there is another fire, older than Narya, twisted long ago to darkness. A fallen Maya, a Balrog, sleeping in forgotten deeps, the lingering shadow of Morgoth's war. Gandalf tightens his fingers around the ring of fire, and hopes, with a quiet, almost desperate hope, that their roads will never cross. But of course, as we journey into the hidden centuries of his wanderings, we uncover how the fate of Middle-earth has other plans. From Elorin to Gandalf, naming the wanderer Gandalf, tightens his fingers around the ring of fire and hopes their roads will never cross. And here, for a moment, we pull back from the mists and name the wanderer who fears what sleeps beneath the mountains. In the west, before ever he wore grey, he was Elorin, a Maya of quiet thought and compassion, walking unseen in the gardens of Lorien, learning pity from Nienna's tears. Not a mere wanderer, not simply a wizard, but an ancient spirit older than the world itself, who watched the First Age burn with Balrog fire and dragon flame. To the elves of Middle-earth he will be Mithrandir, the grey pilgrim. To the dwarves Tharkun, bringer of counsel at their gates. In the hot, forgotten south he will be Incanus, a half-remembered shadow in desert legends. And among men and hobbits at last, he will simply be Gandalf the Grey. The year is around 1000 of the Third Age. Nearly 3,000 years have passed since the downfall of Numenor, and the great war that first cast down Sauron lies in half-remembered tales. Men have grown smaller in their ambitions. Kingdoms have crumbled. The Shire is not yet even a dream. And yet, on the grey quays of the Grey Havens, Elorin steps ashore in the frail body of an old man. This is roughly 2,000 years before Frodo ever takes a single, frightened step beyond his hedgerows. And for those 2 millennia, before a hobbit named Baggins ever finds a ring in the dark, Gandalf will walk roads no map can show, weaving an invisible web of hope across a sleeping age. He will move from hall to hall and fire to fire, a quiet presence in the corner, listening for rumours of a shadow that has not yet taken shape. Not raising armies, not building towers, but strengthening hearts, kindling courage, testing where the world is still willing to resist. We journey into the hidden centuries now, where his many names mark the paths of his wanderings. As Mithrandir, he speaks beneath the stars with Elrond and Galadriel, ring-bearers like himself, and without ever declaring it, an alliance is born. As Tharkun, he sits in dwarven halls, hearing of deep delvings and old fears. As Incarnus, he passes through southern courts where strange cults whisper to the dark. Everywhere he is feeling for the first cold breath of something returning. So across those long grey centuries, what was Gandalf really doing, and how did those hidden choices prepare him for the terror waiting in Moria? That is the story behind the story. We uncover secret councils that will one day be called the White Council, forgotten fortresses where the necromancer first stirs in Dol Guldur, and Gandalf's growing conviction that somewhere in the deep places of the world, old horrors might be waking again. All right, dim the lights, get comfortable. Let's step together into the next turning of the age, where the first whispers of the necromancer reach Mithrandir's ears, and the roads of the grey pilgrim bend, slowly but surely, toward a bridge of stone and a Balrog of Morgoth. Why this story matters. The hidden centuries beneath Moria's bridge. So when that roar goes up in the dark of Moria, when fire blooms on the far side of the chasm, and Gandalf's face changes, we're not just watching a wizard surprised by a monster. We are seeing two ancient spirits born before the making of the world recognize each other across the gulf of ages. And to understand that moment on the bridge of Khazad-dûm, we have to walk the long roads that led him there. That is the heart of this episode. Our thesis is simple, but the roots run deep. If we want to know why Gandalf feared the Balrog, and why he chose to stand and fall on that narrow span of stone, we must uncover the hidden centuries of his wanderings before the Lord of the Rings. Not just the famous councils and battles, but the quiet, grey years when he listened more than he spoke, and learned what kind of enemy was waking in the dark. For nearly 2,000 years before a hobbit named Frodo ever stepped out of the Shire, Gandalf walks early roads through shadowed forests, from the eaves of Greenwood the Great to the rising gloom of Mirkwood. He makes quiet visits to elven refuges, trading tales with Elrond in Rivendell, standing with Galadriel beneath the golden boughs of Lorien, speaking softly of rings and memories of the First Age. He deals cautiously with dwarves in their halls, from the Blue Mountains to the gates of Khazad-dûm, listening to their songs of Mithril and their whispered fears of what might dwell beneath the roots of the world. And in between, there are the lonely wanderings, long, wind-torn journeys where he follows only rumours. A shadow in Dol Guldur, a whispered name in the east, a strange sickness of the heart among men. For centuries he tracks the faint footprints of Sauron's return, piecing together a story no one else is willing to see. Every alliance he forges, every bit of lore he gathers, every instinct that makes him halt the Fellowship, in Moria is earned here, step by step, in the hidden centuries. This is the story behind the story. The invisible foundation beneath that brief, desperate sprint through the dark mines. Without those earlier choices, there is no White Council to debate Dol Guldur, no trust between elves and dwarves after the quest of Erebor, no quiet love for hobbits that will one day place the ring in Frodo's hands. Without those roads, there is no Fellowship at all, and there is certainly no wizard prepared in body and in soul to face a Balrog of Morgoth. So, what are we promising as we journey into these forgotten years? We'll move from the cosmic origins of Gandalf and the Balrog as Maiar, through the shifting politics of the Third Age, and down into the deep psychology of fear in one grey pilgrim's heart. Along the way, we uncover how fire, rings, and memory shape Gandalf's choices. Until that last stand on the bridge becomes not an accident, but the climax of his entire mission and a turning point in the fate of Middle-earth. Stay with us. The next step takes us back before the sun and moon, to the first fires where both of these spirits were made. Before we go deeper, Join the circle around the fire. Before we follow Gandalf back into those first fires, let's step together into something a little closer to home for a moment. There's a quiet pattern I keep seeing in the numbers behind these journeys. About 7 out of 10 people who come back to these deep dives into Middle-earth lore, who listen through these ancient wars and hidden wanderings, aren't actually subscribed. Not a crisis, not a problem to fix, just a small, curious detail, like finding an unmarked path branching off the main road. So, all right, dim the lights, get comfortable under your blanket, or whatever your version of a Hobbit armchair is. These long cinematic explorations of the story behind the story take time to weave, cross-checking the ages, tracing Gandalf's grey footsteps through the centuries, finding the one line in an appendix that changes how we see the fate of Middle-earth. They're built slowly, like a dwarf hall under the mountain, stone by stone, until the whole world feels solid around you. If you find yourself returning to this kind of storytelling, if you like when we journey into the hidden centuries and follow one choice, one fire, one fear, all the way to a bridge in the dark, then subscribing is a simple way to keep that road open. It tells the strange, invisible powers of the algorithm that there is a fellowship for this, that there are people who want the camera to linger, who want the lore to breathe. So here's the small, low-friction request. If you haven't yet, tap subscribe. And if you want to be called back whenever we uncover another forgotten war, another buried character arc, another quiet decision that shifts the world, tap the bell as well. Not a binding oath, not a ring on your finger. Just a way of saying, yes, bring me along next time. And I'm curious about you, truly. Where are you right now as you listen to this? Are you on a late-night walk? Streets empty and the world turned grey and quiet? Are you on a morning commute, the bus, or train your own little caravan crossing the plains? Are you tucked into a quiet afternoon, headphones on, letting the age of Gondolin and Moria drift through the walls of your very modern room? Tell me in the comments. Let's map this listening circle together, because that's what this channel really is. A scattered fellowship. You in one corner of the world, someone else halfway across the globe, all of us leaning in toward the same firelight, sharing the same story at the same time. Different time zones, different lives, but one circle, one ritual. We dim the lights, get comfortable, and for a while the centuries between us and Gandalf's world grow thin. Hold on to that feeling, because now we're going to follow him back before Shire and Shadow, before hobbits and rings, into the ancient blaze where both he and the Balrog were first kindled. Dim the lights, stepping back into the Third Age. So before we follow them into that ancient blaze, let's slow everything down again, step out of tabs and timelines for a moment, and back into the long twilight of the Third Age. Dim the lights, get comfortable under your blanket. If you can, put on a kettle, cradle a mug of something warm between your hands, and let a fan or a soft rain track murmur in the background, like distant wind curling through the passes of the misty mountains. We're not just watching a video now. We're building a little pocket of Middle-earth around us. Let's step together into that space. Let the glow of your screen be the last campfire at the edge of the wild. The room behind you fades. The buttons and recommendations blur into shadow. For a little while there is only you and all of us listening to the same story behind the story. Outside our circle, the YouTube world keeps racing. But in here, the year is about 1000 of the Third Age. Nearly 3000 years have passed since the last alliance broke Sauron's body on the black slopes of Orodruin. Men have forgotten much. The great kingdoms of the West are cracked and diminished. Elves linger in their hidden havens. Dwarves delve deep beneath stone. Hobbits are so quiet that most of the world barely remembers they exist at all. This is long before Bilbo's birthday party, long before a frightened hobbit runs from black riders on the road. The Shire is at peace, and will be for many centuries yet. To most people in this age, the shadow is only a rumour, a half-remembered nightmare from their grandfathers' tales. Why worry when the Dark Lord has been gone for an age? And yet, along the western shore, a grey figure walks. He is Gandalf, yes, but here in these hidden centuries, let's call him what the wise sometimes whisper: the Grey Pilgrim, the bearer of hidden fire. In his hand, unseen by almost all, Narya glows with a quiet ember light, a ring meant not to dominate, but to kindle courage when hearts would otherwise fail. As we journey into this time, feel how different the world is. No fellowship, no open war, only scattered watchfires of wisdom, Elrond in Imladris, Galadriel in Lorien, Círdan at the Havens, a few chieftains of men holding broken lines against the dark. Into this half-forgotten age walks the Grey Pilgrim, not with armies, but with questions. Where has the shadow gone? Why does unease cling to the edges of the map? What sleeps beneath mountain and forest that the songs no longer name? So take a breath with me. Listen to the low hiss of your fan like wind in the pines of Eriador, or the patter of rain like the mists of Ithilien. Let's step together into the hidden roads of this age, as we uncover what men, elves, dwarves, and even those quiet hobbits were doing when the Grey Pilgrim first set out, and why the fate of Middle-earth was already being woven, far from any dragon's hoard or hobbit hole door. A world after great wars. The Third Age. Around year 1000. When we open our eyes on Middle-earth again, the world is quiet, but it is not at peace. The year is around 1000 of the Third Age, roughly a millennium since the last alliance of elves and men broke Sauron's body on the slopes of Orodruin and cut the One Ring from his burning hand. An ancient war has ended. An ancient wound has not. Men stand at the centre of this age, but their strength is already fraying. Gondor still gleams along the Anduin, its white towers and great walls, a fading echo of Numenor's drowned glory. Yet its borders have shrunk, its vigilance dulled, and its victories are now memories recited in halls rather than deeds done on grey battlefields. In the north, Arna has shattered into petty successor realms, brothers turned into rival kings over empty leagues of wind-swept plain, and the old unity of Elendil's house against the shadow is already slipping into half-remembered legend. People live, love, and quarrel beneath banners whose meaning they no longer fully recall. Around them, the elves move like moonlight through a dimming world. Their numbers are dwindling, their realms are hidden, half withdrawn from the roads of men. In Lindon beside the sea, in Rivendell deep in its secret valley, in the golden hush of Lothlorien, they maintain islands of ancient beauty, yet their faces are turned west. Ship by ship, year by slow year, they pass over the grey waves to the undying lands, weary of the long defeat, feeling in their hearts that the light of Middle-earth is thinning like the last embers of a fire. How long can such guardians stand watch over a people who scarcely remember they are guarded at all? Beneath stone and mountain, the dwarves labour and sing. Khazad-dûm is still the greatest of their mansions, its halls beneath the misty mountains glittering with mithril veins and echoing with hammers. Proud, secretive, they delve ever deeper, nursing old grudges against elves and dragons alike, hoarding treasures won in forgotten wars. Other strongholds in the Blue Mountains and beyond the great rivers hold their own grim splendor. To men, they are distant allies. To themselves, they are survivors of a broken world, clinging to craft and kin as the ages roll by. And then, almost invisible in a corner of Eriador, there are the hobbits. A quiet, rustic folk in holes and farmsteads along the upper Brandywine, tilling earth, smoking pipeweed, arguing about meals and genealogy, unknown to the wise. Their peace rests on alliances and sacrifices they do not even imagine, let alone understand. Yet in that very smallness lies a mystery we will soon uncover. All right, dim the lights, get comfortable. As we journey into this grey, weary millennium, let's step together into the hidden centuries when a grey pilgrim first arrives in this fading world, and the fate of Middle-earth begins, quietly, to turn. Cracks in the peace, rumours from the east, and the deep places. We step out of the bright halls of Elrond and Galadriel now, and into the wider world they can no longer hold together. The Third Age is long and grey. The great banners of alliance that once flew over Middle-earth are tattered, their colours faded, their memories half forgotten. Elves, men, and dwarves still share the same world, still walk the same ancient roads, but they rarely share counsel. Old oaths have rusted in the rain of centuries. The elves retreat behind hidden borders, grieving a beauty that is passing. The dwarves delve after mithril and gold, proud and secretive in their mountain halls. Men quarrel over thrones and river crossings, their lifespans too short to remember how dearly peace was bought. The story behind the story is fragmentation, not one great breaking, but a slow, quiet, drifting apart. And into those widening gaps, shadows begin to move. At first it is only whispers. A caravan out of Rune that arrives in Dale missing 3 wagons. A herdsman in Rohan who speaks of wolves with eyes like coals pacing the outer fields. A ranger in the north who finds orc sign where, by all reckoning, no orc should dare to walk. Night after night, travellers from the east and south bring uneasy tales, half doubted and half believed. Have you noticed how often trouble begins as rumour, long before anyone will name it as war? The great kingdoms are busy with nearer concerns. Gondor watches its borders and counts its dead kings, arguing over lines of succession and the strength of its walls. In the north, petty lordships rise and fall, caring more for trade routes and tolls than for prophecies. Even among the Eldar, councils turn to shipwrights and sailing schedules, to the slow, sorrowful departure into the west. Politics, borders, tariffs, marriages, so much noise on the surface of the world, while something older than politics stirs beneath. For the wise, those rare few who still listen for deeper echoes, the pattern feels wrong. The orc raids are too bold, the wolves are too many. There are darker things than wolves abroad, though most will never see them. We journey into a time when Radagast hears the silence of birds, when Galadriel feels a weight pressing on Lothlorien like an unseen hand, when Gandalf walks the wilds alone and finds tracks that do not match any beast of this age. and under it all lie the deep places. Abandoned fortresses on knife-edge ridges, their gates choked with ivy. Forgotten tunnels beneath ruined watchtowers where stale air tastes of old fire. The dark roots of the misty mountains where caverns twist down and down into blackness no sun has ever touched. In those hidden depths, remnants of the First Age may still sleep, ancient spirits of fire and terror, buried in rock and time, unknown to most of Middle-earth, but not to those who remember Morgoth. All right, dim the lights, get comfortable again. Because as we uncover these hairline fractures in the Third Age, we begin to see Gandalf's mission differently. He has not come into a world truly at peace, but into a house with fine painted walls and a cracked foundation, a world where every rumour from the East might be an echo from the First Age. And when his wandering roads finally draw him toward one abandoned dwarf realm under the mountains, those fractures will converge in a single name the wise have prayed never to hear again. Moria. What, then, is waiting for him in that dark? Who are the Istari? 5 old men from beyond the world. What, then, is waiting for him in that dark? Not only an ancient beast, not only a shadow with a whip of fire, but something that reaches back beyond the Third Age, beyond the fall of Númenor, into the first breaking of the world. To understand why Gandalf's heart tightens on the bridge of Khazad-dûm, we have to step away from Moria's abyss and look at who he really is. Into this grey, weary world come 5 wizards, the Istari, sent from beyond the circles of the world itself. Saruman the White, proud and exacting, first among them in rank and in knowledge of ring lore and the devices of the enemy. Radagast the Brown, gentle and distracted, whose love runs down the forest roads with birds and beasts while the councils of kings pass him by. 2 blue wanderers, Alatar and Palando, who vanish into the forgotten east, their wanderings swallowed by shadow and rumour. And Gandalf the Grey, the pilgrim of pipe smoke and sudden fire, who will walk further and risk more than any of them. But this is the story behind the story. They are not merely old men with staffs and cloaks. They are Maiar, lesser Ainur, spirits who once stood in the undying light of the blessed realm before mountains were raised or seas were poured. Gandalf was Olorin in Valinor, walking in the gardens of Lorien, learning pity from Nienna, beholding the Vala face to face. Saruman, Curanir, served Aule and studied the making of things. Even the unnamed blue wizards shared that same ancient origin, older than the sun and moon. And yet, when they cross the sea, they accept a terrible limitation. Not a mere disguise, not a convenient illusion, but incarnation. They are bound into the forms of old men, able to feel cold and hunger, weariness and pain, able even to die and pass out of the world. Their vast spiritual power is folded in on itself, veiled and restrained. Have you ever wondered why Gandalf does not simply blast armies aside or stride into Barad-dûr in a blaze of glory? This is why. He is under a constraint deeper than fear. The Valar send them with a mission defined first by what they must not do. They may not challenge Sauron in open displays of might, may not set themselves up as rulers or war kings over elves and men. No new tyrants in the name of opposing the old. Even Saruman, in all his pride, begins as a servant under this ban, forbidden to seize the fate of Middle-earth into his own hands. Instead, their true purpose is quieter and far more demanding. They are to walk among elves, men, dwarves and hobbits as counsellors and friends, to kindle courage where hearts are failing, to unite scattered peoples, to inspire resistance rather than dominate it. Gandalf's power is meant to be a fire in other hearts, not a storm from the sky. And for nearly 2,000 hidden centuries of the Third Age, he lives by that rule, choosing small conversations over great banners. All right, dim the lights, get comfortable, because here is the pattern interrupt. When such a constrained spirit suddenly meets a Balrog, another Maya who is not bound by those same gentle chains, what happens to that careful balance? In the next part, we journey into the First Age of Terror to uncover what a Balrog truly is, and why even Gandalf the Grey quails when its shadow rises in Moria. Saruman the White and Gandalf the Grey, a hierarchy with hidden tensions. So when we speak of Gandalf meeting a Balrog, we are not talking about the champion of his order striding forth in full authority. We are talking about the odd one out, the grey wanderer in a hierarchy that, from the very beginning, was built around a different kind of leader. In the councils of the Valar, before the world was aged and worn, Curanir was chosen to be first among the Istari, Saruman the White. He was the one steeped in ancient lore, in the making of devices, in the secrets of ringcraft and the strategies of the enemy. Not a mere scholar, not simply a wizard of books and scrolls, but the designated head of the Order, the one expected to stand foremost when Sauron's shadow rose again in the world. Gandalf, by contrast, arrives in Middle-earth cloaked in grey, with no titles proclaimed. While Saruman gathers knowledge in towers and strongholds, Gandalf walks the roads. He listens in smoky inn-rooms, lingers at hobbit birthday parties, shares pipes with rangers in forgotten corners of the north. Saruman seeks to master and to direct. Gandalf seeks to befriend and to awaken. One trusts in devices and design, the other in the quiet courage of small hearts. Which path sounds more efficient when the fate of Middle-earth hangs in the balance? From early on, we uncover thin, hairline fractures in this hierarchy. Saruman grows impatient with Gandalf's wanderings, his refusal to settle, his interest in what seems trivial. Fireworks for Shire festivals, long visits to Bree, conversations with Beorn in the wild. To Saruman, this looks like negligence. To Gandalf, it is the work. And then there is Narya. At the Grey Havens, Círdan the shipwright looks into the heart of this grey stranger and does something quietly revolutionary. He gives the Ring of Fire not to the appointed head of the Order, but to the unassuming pilgrim. Saruman learns of this, and a subtle jealousy kindles, a slow, hidden ember that will one day blaze into open treachery. Can you feel how that would sting for one who believes himself first in wisdom? All right, dim the lights, get comfortable, because this is the story behind the story. Gandalf moves through the Third Age, often without the full support of his own kind. In the White Council, Saruman's voice dominates, delaying action against Dol Guldur, dismissing Gandalf's fears, treating his reports as overcautious tales from the road. Again and again, Gandalf is pushed to the margins, forced to work through alliances with Elrond, Galadriel, and, most scandalous of all, hobbits. And for centuries, while Saruman calculates from Isengard, Gandalf quietly carries the true heart of their mission: to strengthen the weak, to resist domination, to kindle hope rather than rule by fear. So when, in the dark of Moria, he finally stands before Durin's Bane, he does so not as the White, not as the official champion of the Istari, but as the grey wanderer who has spent ages walking beside the small and overlooked. Let's step together into that moment, because next we journey into what it means for this constrained, compassionate Maya to face a Balrog that remembers the first age of terror, a Maya among Maiar, Gandalf's true nature and its limits. So when Gandalf steps out onto that narrow bridge in Moria, cloak whipping in the ancient dark, we are not watching a mere old man defy a monster. We are watching one Maya stand before another, two spirits from before, the making of the world meeting again in the depths of the Third Age. And to feel the weight of that, we journey into who Gandalf really is, before there was sun or moon, before the long grey wanderings on Middle-earth's roads. There was Olorin. In the timeless halls he is counted among the Maiar, lesser only than the Valar themselves. And when the world is shaped, he dwells in the gardens of Lorien and in the house of Nienna. There he walks among dream and memory, learning pity from the lady who weeps for the hurts of Arda, learning patience from the slow healing of ancient griefs. Not a mere wanderer, not simply a wizard, but an immortal spirit schooled in sorrow and mercy long before hobbits ever lit pipes in the Shire. And that origin carries with it memories, dimmed, veiled, but not erased. Olorin has seen the first age's terrors, when Balrogs were not half-whispered legends, but captains in Morgoth's armies, thundering through the shadowed skies of Beleriand. He knows the fall of Gondolin, the slaying of Feanor, the screams that echoed when the world itself seemed to crack. So when he names Durin's Bane a Balrog, he is not identifying a species, he is recognizing an old nightmare, a former comrade among the Ainur, twisted, burned, and enthralled to the first Dark Lord. All right, dim the lights, get comfortable, because here is the story behind the story. When the Valar send Olorin into Middle-earth, they do not unleash him, they bind him. He comes as Gandalf the Grey in the body of a frail, elderly man. His true stature is like a mountain hidden under a cloak of mist, his power channeled and restrained by design. He can tire, he can bleed, he can die. And for nearly 2,000 years he accepts this limitation, walking the hidden centuries with staff in hand, choosing counsel over conquest. This is the paradox of his incarnation. He carries within him a fire older than the world, yet his hands shake when he leans on his staff. He has seen the hosts of Valinor ride to war, yet he must haggle with innkeepers and coax courage out of frightened hobbits. When he feels fear, when pain and exhaustion rack him on the peak of Ziraxigil, it is not an act. It is the honest terror of one who knows exactly what a Balrog can do, and who must still face it with the lungs and bones of an old man. And the chains on him are not only physical. The Valar forbid the Astari to dominate wills, or to unmake their foes in open displays of overwhelming force. Gandalf's task is to persuade, to endure, to sacrifice, to kindle courage in others rather than blaze alone. Even if he could shatter Durin's Bane with a word, he is not allowed to wage that kind of war. So what happens when a constrained servant of the secret fire meets a fire demon of Morgoth in a place where no one else can stand with him? In the next part, we uncover exactly how that hidden, cosmic parity explodes on the bridge of Khazad-dûm. Servant of the secret fire. What Gandalf's claim really means. And there, on that narrow bridge above the Black Chasm, we finally hear him name what he truly is. Gandalf does not shout a random threat into the dark. He makes a declaration that reaches far beyond Moria's echoing halls. I am a servant of the secret fire, wielder of the flame of Anor. Not bravado, not a clever wizard line. A precise theological statement spoken by an ancient spirit who remembers the first music of the world. To catch its weight, we journey into the story behind the story. Back before Khazad-dûm, before the Shire, before even the sun and moon. In Tolkien's legendarium, the secret fire is the hidden flame of Eru Ilúvatar himself, the creative power that brings the music of the Ainur into actual being. It is the fire that burns at the heart of the world, the life-giving, world-sustaining power that does not merely start creation and leave it, but continues to uphold every stone, every star, every hobbit's heartbeat. When Gandalf claims to serve this fire, he is aligning himself openly with the will of the One beyond the Valar, with a quiet, persistent creativity that opposes all unmaking. This is the axis on which the fate of Middle-earth really turns. And Gandalf is not merely a priest of that flame, he is kin to it. As Olorin, a Maya, he is one of the lesser Ainur who stood before the world was shaped. Sent into Middle-earth in grey, diminished flesh, he is charged not to dominate, but to kindle. That is why Círdan's secret gift matters so much. Narya, the Ring of Fire, is attuned to this same secret fire. Its power is not to scorch armies but to rouse hearts, to resist weariness and despair, to make courage flare again in a failing age. Think of the Shire stirred to action, of Theoden waking from shadow, of little folk standing where kings might falter. That is the secret fire at work through a humble wanderer. The Balrog is fire as well, but of another philosophy entirely. Once it too was a Maya of flame, like Aryan who guides the sun. Under Morgoth's corruption, that bright nature is twisted into a weapon. Its fire is loud, ruinous, enslaving. It burns not to create, but to consume, to break wills, to unmake cities like Gondolin and scatter peoples into the dark. Where the secret fire sustains, the Balrog's fire devours. Where Narya rekindles hope, Durin's bane magnifies terror. Can you feel how those two ancient currents collide on that bridge? All right, dim the lights, get comfortable for a second, because this is the pattern interrupt. That clash in Moria is not really wizard versus monster at all. It is a meeting of two interpretations of flame itself. One is secret, patient, self-emptying, content to work through hobbits and hidden roads. The other is spectacular, oppressive, delighted in fear. When Gandalf plants his staff and forbids the Balrog to pass, he is not only blocking a corridor, he is drawing a line between creation and unmaking. Let's step together into what happens when those two fires actually touch, and why that contact burns Gandalf out of his grey body and sends him beyond the circles of the world before he returns, changed as something new. Shadows of the First Age. Where Balrogs came from. When those two fires touch on the bridge of Khazad-dûm, we are not watching a new quarrel begin. We are seeing an old war flare back to life. To understand why Gandalf's voice trembles and why his fear is so sharp, we journey into an age so ancient that even Elrond only remembers the echo of it. Long before hobbits tilled the Shire or the White Tree grew in Gondor, before the sun itself had fully risen on the young world, there were the Ainur, the great music makers of creation. Among them were the Maiar, lesser, but still terrible in power. Some loved the growing light, others heard a different call. Melkor, the mightiest of the Valar, raised his dark will like a discordant chord, and many of these spirits were seduced or simply broken by his strength. In the hidden centuries before the First Age, he took some who were of fire and wrath, and he twisted them. These became the Balrogs. Not mere beasts, not mindless demons, but lieutenants, captains of terror. When the wars of Beleriand raged across the starlit lands of the north, Balrogs were the shock troops of Morgoth's hatred. Towering man-shaped shadows wreathed in living flame, wielding swords like molten night and whips of many thongs that could drag down even the proudest. Armies did not just break before them, courage itself failed. Can you imagine standing your ground as that fire walks toward you? We uncover their trail in the pages of the Silmarillion. When Feanor, greatest of the Noldor in spirit and in pride, pressed too far toward Angband, it was a host of Balrogs that surrounded him. There, beneath a sky lit by their fire and his wrath, they struck him down, so that even his legendary fury could not carve a path through their ranks. Later, on the plains of the Nirnaeth Arnoediad, Fingon the Valiant, High King of the Noldor, met Gothmog, Lord of Balrogs. Their duel was the clash of two ages of the world, but in the end the black axe and burning whip prevailed, and Fingon fell trampled and consumed. At Gondolin's fall, when that hidden city's beauty was torn open, Balrog strode through the smoke, side by side with dragons. They drove back Ecthelion and Glorfindel, and all the flower of elven chivalry, each appearance a sign that the battle had turned from desperate to catastrophic. Even high elven lords in their prime, bearing blades like Ringil and Glamdring, could barely stand against a single Balrog, and often they died to buy only a few heartbeats of retreat for others. So when Gandalf faces Durin's Bane, he is not meeting an unknown terror. He is a Maya looking into the eyes of what his own people once became. He remembers, in ways beyond words, what it cost to oppose such creatures when the world was younger, and every wound left a deeper scar. His fear is not cowardice, it is historical memory. All right, dim the lights, get comfortable, because in the next stretch we step from that ancient battlefield terror back into the narrow stone of Moria, and ask, what does it mean when an old war comes crashing into a Third Age quest? Gondolin in flames, a Balrog's power at its height. So to feel what Gandalf feels in that black gulf of Moria, we journey into an older fire. Not the Third Age, not the grey years of wandering, but a First Age night when a hidden city met its doom. Imagine Gondolin at dawn, before the world breaks. White walls rising from a green valley, towers gleaming like spears of light, fountains singing in the cool air, while the people of Turgon move through their ordered, beautiful roads. For centuries it has been the great secret of the West, the last perfect dream of the Eldar, closed against the shadow by mountains and by oath, and then, in a single treacherous morning, the dream is shattered. The gates are thrown down, the mountains vomit forth iron and flame, and dragons crawl through the breaches like living siege towers. Behind them come the Balrogs. Not many. They do not need to be many. Dark shapes crowned in fire, whips lashing, they stride beneath the falling towers, as if the ruin of a city were only the proper music for their march. Elven captains who have faced orcs and wolves without flinching feel their courage falter at the sight of one of these ancient spirits of terror. Formations break, shields lower, songs die in their throats. How do you hold your line when the air itself seems to burn with an enemy's presence? In the chaos, a remnant flees into the high passes, snow stained with ash behind them. Among them is Glorfindel, golden-haired, bright as a star against the grey rock, and on a narrow ridge above a chasm, the hunt ends. A single Balrog bars the way, its fire a hateful echo of the secret fire Gandalf will later name. One creature. One. Yet every elf there knows. This is enough to doom them all if it passes. They clash like two fallen constellations. Glorfindel's blade is white flame, his armour radiant. The Balrog is shadow and furnace heat, roaring in a tongue from before the maker of the world. The rocks split under their feet. Sparks whirl into the dark like lost ages. At last, with a final stroke and a desperate grapple, Glorfindel hurls the Balrog from the cliff, and it drags him down in its ruin. Victory, bought with the life of a lord. Salvation, balanced on the edge of a single duel. Does that feel familiar now, at the bridge of Khazad-dûm? When Gandalf senses Durin's bane, he is not groping after some nameless monster. He is a Maya remembering Morgoth's lieutenants, recalling cities overturned, kings slain, the fate of Middle-earth hanging on whether one Balrog stands or falls. He knows what walked in Gondolin. He knows what one such being can do. And if Gondolin, with all its hidden strength, its walls, its warriors, its long preparation could burn before creatures like this, what chance does a single grey wanderer have, alone in the dark halls of Khazad-dûm, when the ancient fire wakes and comes for him? Hold that thought, because in the next moment we uncover what happens when he chooses to stand anyway. From many to one, Durin's bane and the last known Balrog. And when he chooses to stand, it is not against a nameless terror of this one dark hall. It is against a remnant of a war that nearly broke the world. To understand why that matters, we journey into the long shadow behind this single blazing figure in Moria. By the end of the First Age, when the hosts of the West at last overthrew Morgoth and tore his strongholds from the earth, the Balrogs were broken with him. In the great ruin of Thangorodrim, most of these fire spirits were destroyed, hunted down by the Valar and their allies, or driven into deep hiding. The chronicles say few, if any, remained. That is the scale we are dealing with here. Not a common monster, but one of the last embers of an almost forgotten apocalypse. Long ages pass, seas are moved, mountains raised, Beleriand itself sinks beneath the waves. Men build kingdoms and forget. The dwarves of Khazad-dûm delve deeper, following bright veins of mithril under the Redhorn. They do not know that in those blackest deeps, in chambers older than their language, one of those hidden embers has been sleeping, wrapped in ash and stone. The awakening of Durin's bane is not a single dramatic moment, but a slow, creeping horror. First tremors in the roots of the mountains, as if the bones of the world were shifting in their sleep. Then strange fires far below, glimpsed at the edge of lamplight. Heat on the face where no forge burns. Whispers of miners who go down and do not come back. And at last, it rises. The Balrog slays Durin the Sixth, king of Khazad-dûm, and soon after his son, Nine the First. The greatest dwarven kingdom of the Third Age, the proud heart of Durin's folk, is abandoned to ash and echo. From that point on, it has a name, Durin's bane. But a name is almost all anyone has. Even the wise do not possess a neat chronicle of this creature. It is a rumour carried on the roads, a shadow in travellers' tales, the whispered explanation for why Moria, once a place of light and song, is now a word spoken with dread. No lore master in Rivendell can tell you precisely when it woke, how long it brooded, what designs it nursed in the dark. And that uncertainty is its own weapon. Gandalf knows the kind of being it is. As a Maya himself, he can feel the ancient weight behind that flame. But he does not know this Balrog's full strength, its cunning, its scars from the First Age. Is it one of Morgoth's captains from the fall of Gondolin? Was it present when Feanor died on the shores of the north? These are the hidden centuries we can only guess at. All right, dim the lights. Get comfortable for a moment, because here is the story behind the story. When Gandalf steps onto that bridge, he faces not just fire and whip and shadow, but an enemy unbound by any mortal limit, as old as his own spirit. And the fate of Middle-earth will hinge on what happens when those two ancient flames collide. In the next part, we uncover what that clash reveals about Gandalf himself, about the secret fire he serves, and why he must die before he can truly return. Gandalf's early wanderings, learning the shape of the shadow. To understand that collision of ancient flames on the bridge of Khazad-dûm, we journey into the long grey years before it, when Gandalf is not yet the Balrog's foe, but a quiet wanderer learning the shape of the shadow he will one day confront. In those first centuries after his arrival, he does not build towers or gather armies. He walks. From the harbours of Lindon, where Círdan watches the sea and remembers the west, to the young refuge of Imladris, where Elrond keeps the last high memories of the First Age, Gandalf moves like a weathered pilgrim along the forgotten roads of the Third Age. He lingers in halls of men, in Bree's smoky common room, in the wooden fortresses of the North Kingdom's ragged heirs. He descends to the doors of dwarven kingdoms, listening to the ring of hammers in Khazad-dûm's distant echo and in the newer mansions of the Iron Hills. Always moving, never quite at rest, and as he walks, he listens more than he speaks. This is the story behind the story. The great wizard as an old man by the fire, pipe in hand, coaxing songs from shepherds and half-remembered tales from innkeepers. He gathers fragments of the First Age from elven minstrels, rumours of dragons in the north, whispers of nameless things beneath the mountains. He notes every mention of a dark wood where travellers do not return, every peasant's superstition about a hill that feels like watching eyes. What if, he wonders, these are not merely campfire fears, but scattered reflections of something older, deeper, still awake? At first, the darkness seems diffuse. A band of orcs here, a white-haunted mound there, wolves growing bolder in winter. But as the centuries pass, a pattern troubles him. The attacks grow more coordinated. Strange creatures move as if driven. There is a will behind the shadow, a mind, yet its seat is hidden. Is it in the east, beyond even the blue wizard's wanderings? In the deeps of the world? Or somewhere far closer than the wise dare to admit? Then come the first rumours from Greenwood the Great, a sickness in the heart of the forest. Spiders, webs, a dimming of light beneath the boughs. Men speak of a hill fortress where a necromancer dwells, and the very air tastes of fear. Gandalf's road bends toward Dol Guldur, and though this section of our tale will later return to that dark tower in full, for now we simply note this. The Grey Wanderer has begun a long campaign to locate the new source of the shadow, to name the hidden power before it is too late. In that search, certain places stand out. Old fortresses can be retaken, wild lands can be tamed, but some deeps feel wrong in their very foundations. Moria is one of these. Long before Balin dreams of reclaiming it, Gandalf hears dwarves speak of Khazad-dûm with a mingled pride and dread, as if the halls themselves remember an older terror. He comes to understand that there are wounds in the world where ancient powers sank down and never fully slept. So when, much later, the Fellowship stands before the dark of Moria's gate, Gandalf is not merely wary of goblins and collapsing stairs. He is measuring the echo of those forgotten centuries, weighing all he has learned about shadows that gather and the things of fire and fear that may yet be waiting in the deep places of the world. Friends in high places, Elrond, Galadriel, and the Web of Counsel. So when, much later, the Fellowship stands before the dark of Moria's gate, Gandalf is not only hearing the echo of collapsing stairs. In his mind, other echoes answer. The clash of ancient hosts, the roar of fallen mountains, the cries of cities that no longer exist in this world. And those echoes are not his alone. For in Rivendell, far from the deeps of Khazad-dûm, there are other nights. Quiet, lamplit evenings where the rain patters softly on Elrond's terraces, and two grey figures bend over cracked parchments and fading maps. Men have forgotten the First Age. Many elves speak of it only in song. But here, in these hidden halls, we journey into the long memory of the world, as Gandalf and Elrond trace, line by fragile line, the records of Beleriand, of wars against a Dark Lord even more terrible than Sauron. You can almost see it. Gandalf's hand, stained with road dust, resting beside a name like Gondolin, while Elrond, descendant of that ruined city, quietly recalls tales of fire in the hidden vale, of Balrogs leaping amid towers of white stone. These are not heroic campfire legends. They are strategic briefings across centuries. What did it take to bring down a city blessed by Ulmo? How many Balrogs marched under Morgoth's banners? How did even the bravest fall before whips of flame and shadow? In these councils, the Balrog is not a myth. It is a known quantity of terror. And Rivendell is only one node in this web of counsel. Far to the east, across leagues of forest and river, lies Lothlorien, where time itself feels thinner, and memory is almost a physical presence in the golden air. When Gandalf walks the green sward beneath the Malorn trees and stands before Galadriel, he is speaking with one who remembers the light of the two trees, who saw the rise of Feanor and the ruin that followed his pride. She has heard, with her own ears, the first reports of Balrogs in the wars of Beleriand. What does it do to a wandering wizard to sit beside Galadriel's mirror and hear, in a voice calm and grave, of Feanor's fall, of Fingon's courage, of Glorfindel's last stand against a Balrog above the abyss near Gondolin? We uncover the story behind the story here. Gandalf's fear is not vague. It is educated. It is informed by 1,000 precise, terrible details shared by those who were there. Through Elrond, through Galadriel, through many smaller voices in forgotten corners, Gandalf gains access to a tapestry of deep lore. This is the quiet counterpart to his wanderings among hobbits and farmers. On one road he learns the hearts of the humble. On another he learns exactly what horrors might one day threaten them. And among the Astari, he alone stands at that crossroads, the one most attuned to both the high counsels of the wise and the small, stubborn courage of the free peoples. That double vision forges a heavy sense of responsibility. If a Balrog were to wake beneath the mountains, who else would both recognize it and care first for the fate of Middle-earth's weakest? Not Saruman in his tower, not Radagast among his birds. The burden settles inevitably on the grey pilgrim's shoulders. So even in Rivendell's music, even beneath Lorien's golden leaves, there are moments when Gandalf falls silent, gaze turned towards some unseen depth. The rooms are safe, the borders are warded, yet the names they speak, Morgoth, Gondolin, Balrog, draw a longer, colder shadow across his gentle humour. And one day, on a broken bridge in the dark, we will see exactly what has been haunting those quiet councils all along. The dwarves and the deep, Gandalf's first glimpses of Moria's fate. So when we hear those names in elven halls, Morgoth, Gondolin, Balrog, and see Gandalf's eyes grow distant, we're not just hearing old history. We're hearing an echo of another place in Middle-earth, a place of stone and shadow that has already claimed one ancient king, and will one day claim the Grey Wanderer himself. Long before the Fellowship, long before Balin's doomed colony, Gandalf is already listening for the silence that spreads out of Khazad-dûm. He does it the slow way, not with counsels but with visits. He walks the deep roads to the Blue Mountains, shares pipeweed and proverbs with dwarves in exile, leans on his staff by newly carved gates. He admires their craftsmanship without flattery, runs his hand along rune-cut pillars, and waits out their reserve with the patience of centuries. Dwarves are not quick to trust, least of all an elf friend in grey, but they learn that this one remembers names, honours bargains, and keeps their secrets. At first, the stories of Khazad-dûm are all pride. In the early Third Age, when we journey into the hidden centuries of Gandalf's wanderings, the dwarves still speak of Durin's halls as the heart of their world. They boast of Mithril, of endless stairs and mirrored lakes, of hammers that never sleep. Khazad-dûm is not a legend then. It is home, and its name is spoken with a kind of fierce, unshakable joy. But as the years pass, the tone shifts. Praise becomes caution. A craftsman in the Blue Mountains will mention a shadow in the deep places, and then change the subject. A trader from the east will speak of tunnels sealed, of drums faintly heard, and then fall silent. The mithril still comes, until it doesn't. And one day, in an age when men are worrying over their own fading kingdoms, a quieter disaster reaches Gandalf's ears. Durin is dead, slain by something unnamed that haunts the deeps. All right, dim the lights, get comfortable, because this is where we uncover the story behind the story. Gandalf has heard of dragons. He has seen the ruin of Smaug's kin in the north. Orcs, trolls, wargs, these are terrible, but they are known quantities. What then can drive the dwarves from the greatest of their mansions, not by siege, not by famine, but by sheer terror in the dark? What answers when miners strike too far beneath the roots of the world? Piece by piece, over conversations half finished and laments half sung, he assembles the truth. They delved too greedily and too deep, the saying will become, but to Gandalf it is more precise than proverb. Somewhere under the Red Horn the dwarves have awakened one of the ancient fire spirits, a Balrog of Morgoth, a remnant of the same war that shattered Beleriand and sent Gondolin into flame. This is no mere monster. This is a Maya like himself, but twisted, chained to shadow and fire. And here is the part we rarely pause to feel. When Gandalf understands this, his reaction is not just strategic calculation, it is recognition. He remembers in ways he cannot fully explain to elves or men what it means when the roots of the mountains stir. He is a servant of the secret fire, allied to the flame that creates. The Balrog is flame that devours. Where they meet, worlds crack. From that moment, Khazad-dûm fixes itself on his inner map as a wound in the world, a place to be avoided if any other road can be found. When he later guides Thorin's company, note how firmly he steers them toward the high pass, how little appetite he has for the dark under the mountains. And when, at last, the Fellowship stands before the West Gate, we will see the weight of centuries in his hesitation. He has known for a long time what waits in the deep. Yet the fate of Middle-earth will not allow him to walk around that shadow forever. The roads are converging. The silence out of Moria is no longer just a dwarven tragedy. It is a question the Third Age itself is asking. And in our next step, we'll watch how Gandalf's path, the dwarves' grief, and Sauron's rise in power all begin to point, inexorably, toward those black doors. Why Gandalf? Fears at all. Vulnerability by design. So we come back to that nagging question, the one that echoes in the dark like a distant drumbeat. If Gandalf is a Maya, why does he look so breakable? Why can an ancient spirit, older than the mountains above Moria, be slain by a fall and a foe of fire and shadow? In the grey mists before the Third Age, in the blessed realm beyond the circles of the world, Gandalf is not an old man with a bent back and a weary step. He is a Lorin, a being of the same order as the Balrog itself, a lesser Ainu who watched the shaping of the seas and the raising of the first mountains. Not a mere wanderer, not simply a wizard, but an immortal mind that once moved unclothed in the thought of Ilúvatar. Left to his own nature, he would not tire, would not age, and fear would be something distant, like a remembered dream. But when the Valar send the Astari into Middle-earth, they do something radical. They bind these ancient spirits into the forms of old men, grey and vulnerable, and they lay strict commands upon them. You shall not rule by fear. You shall not reveal your full majesty. You shall not match Sauron in open display of power. They are sent not as warlords but as counselors, not as conquerors but as companions on the long roads of a fading age. That choice has consequences. It means Gandalf can stumble. It means his hand can shake on a staff, and his lungs can burn with the cold air of Caradhras. It means that when he stands on the bridge of Khazad-dûm and feels the Balrog's heat like a furnace from the First Age, the dread that rises in him is not a theatrical pose. It is real. He truly feels fatigue, doubt and fear, and must choose courage within those limits, just as the dwarves behind him must. And this is the story behind the story of his terror in Moria. He is not a distant god playing at danger for the sake of drama. He is a bound spirit, walking the hidden centuries in a body that can be crushed, burned, or cast down into the abyss. When he looks into that chasm and senses Durin's bane, he knows there is a genuine chance of defeat and death. Does that make him less? Or does it make his stand on that narrow bridge infinitely more meaningful? So when he runs from the Balrog through the dark halls, when he slams doors and spends his strength in desperate wards, he is not being cowardly. He is making a rational assessment of risk within the chains the Valar have placed on him, saving what little power he dares to use for the one moment when there is no other choice. And in our next step, we journey into that moment. The breaking of the bridge, the fall, and what it truly meant for the fate of Middle-earth. Fire against fire, Gandalf and the Balrog as equals and unequals. And here, on that breaking bridge in the dark of Khazad-dûm, we finally see why Gandalf has been holding back for so long. This is not a moment of a wise old man squaring up to a nameless terror. This is a meeting of equals in origin and unequals in purpose. Both Gandalf and the Balrog are Maiar, not beasts, not mortals, not even wizards in the way men use the word, but ancient spirits from before the making of the world, older than the sun and moon, who once moved in the light of the timeless halls. When we journey into this duel, we are not watching a wizard versus a monster. We are watching two fragments of the same primeval choir, one faithful, one fallen, collide in the dark. Yet their power wears very different masks. Gandalf is bound in the guise of a grey old man, his strength channeled and constrained, focused through staff and spoken word, through quiet counsel and sudden command. He kindles hearts, not battlefields. The Balrog does the opposite. Its body is its weapon, a walking revelation of fire and shadow, whips of flame and a darkness that seems to drink the very light from the air. Where Gandalf must choose each act with care, the Balrog simply is its violence. In the First Age, Balrogs strode openly beneath red skies, captains of Morgoth's wars. They helped slay Fëanor, broke the hosts of the Noldor, and at Gondolin they poured through the hidden ways and turned a secret city into a furnace. Elven lords who had faced dragons and countless orcs still fled at the sight of their whips. Tolkien never gives us neat power levels, but the stories whisper enough. Balrogs were among the mightiest of Morgoth's servants, and even the greatest heroes of that age paid in blood to bring one down. Gandalf remembers that age, even if the memories are veiled, and he knows his own chains. When the Astari were sent, they were forbidden to dominate by sheer force, forbidden to become new tyrants in the name of defeating the old. His body can tire, his bones can break, and if he spends too much of his inner fire, he risks not only his mission, but the fragile balance of this Third Age world. To unleash all that lies within him would be to betray the very valor whose trust he bears. So, in Moria, he is not merely facing a dangerous foe. He is facing one of the very few beings in Middle-earth who can truly meet him on his own spiritual plane, with fewer restraints and a memory steeped in the terror of Morgoth. Does the Balrog, unbound by oaths of mercy, perhaps surpass him in raw, unrestrained might? That question hangs over every step on that narrow bridge, over every glowing rune on his shattered staff. Dim the lights, get comfortable, because in the next breath, we uncover what happens when those limits finally break, and Gandalf passes through fire, shadow, and death itself, and does not come back the same. A different kind of courage. Gandalf versus Nazgul, dragons and dark lords. And here is where the contrast becomes almost painful, because we have seen Gandalf stand before many terrors of this world, and the Grey Pilgrim does not usually whisper in fear or hurry his friends through the dark. Think of the Nazgul. On Weathertop, 9 black riders close in, blades drawn, the air itself thick with dread. Aragorn is away, the hobbits are alone. And yet when Gandalf later speaks of that night, There is no hint that he fled in terror. Instead, we glimpse a storm of light and fire on the hill, a wizard hurling blazing strokes against the servants of the Nine. Not a cowering old man, but a barrier of flame between the ring and its hunters. Years later, at the gates of Minas Tirith, the shadow deepens. The Witch King rides forth, the crown invisible on a helm of darkness, and the city trembles. Yet Gandalf sits upon Shadowfax, staff raised, white light kindling against the black. He does not shrink. He does not ask to pass unseen. He is ready to meet the Lord of the Nazgul head-on, if fate allows. Why is that? Or step with us into an earlier age when Smaug still coiled upon his hoard beneath the lonely mountain. Gandalf never marches out alone to duel the dragon in open war, but listen to the quiet confidence of the quest of Erebor. He believes that with the right burglar, the right band of dwarves, the right turn of the hidden roads, even a dragon can be challenged, displaced, made part of the story behind the story of Sauron's fall. Smaug is terrible, yes, but he is a creature of this later world, a fire that can be outthought. And before all that, in the grey forests around Dol Guldur, Gandalf walks straight into the lair of the necromancer. Twice. He moves with caution, cloaked and silent, but not with the naked dread we hear in Moria. He uncovers Sauron's true identity, finds Thrain in torment, steals out again with proof that the ancient enemy has returned. He even presses the White Council to strike, daring a direct challenge to the Dark Lord's rising power. Now lay those scenes beside Moria. There the same Gandalf urges haste again and again. He will not speak Durin's Bane's name. He hopes, almost pleads, that they may pass through unseen. This is not his usual steady boldness. This is a deeper, older fear. Because the Nazgul are wraiths bound to rings. Smaug is a mighty but mortal beast. Sauron, for all his dread, is an enemy Gandalf was sent to oppose. But a Balrog? That is a Maya like himself, a spirit of fire from the First Age twisted in the ancient wars of Morgoth. When Gandalf senses it, he is not just afraid of a monster. He is remembering the hidden centuries before the sun, when Balrogs broke kingdoms and slew heroes beneath a red sky. All right, dim the lights, get comfortable. Let's step together into those forgotten wars, as we journey into the First Age itself, and watch the Balrogs rise from the original shadow that shaped the fate of Middle-earth. Into the dark, Gandalf's knowledge of Moria. Before the Fellowship, in the deep years that follow those ancient wars, the world quiets on the surface. The seas calm, kingdoms rise and fall. But under the grey teeth of the misty mountains, something does not rest, and one old wanderer feels it, long before a hobbit ever leaves the Shire. Gandalf is not guessing when he approaches Moria. For centuries he has listened, collecting fragments of a broken story. Dwarves of Durin's line speak in low voices of Durin's Bane, of a nameless terror that drove them from Khazad-dûm and slew their king upon the bridge. Elves of Lorien call it the Black Pit, and warn that a shadow of ancient world ruin lies there still. And Gandalf, who once walked in the light of Valinor, hears in those tales an echo of the First Age and of fire that served Morgoth. We journey into his quiet investigations now. On his wanderings he passes often beneath the misty mountains, following roads that skirt their roots, pausing where the stone seems to listen back. He lingers at Dimril Dale. He studies the Mirror. He traces the old West Gate in thought, even when he does not cross it. More than once he feels it, a pressure in the air, a spiritual gravity pulling downward, as if some vast, malevolent presence lies coiled in the dark, waiting. He chooses, again and again, not to go in. Not yet. Not unless the fate of Middle-earth demands it. So when the Fellowship stands on the slopes of Caradhras, and the storm turns against them, his hesitation is not simple caution. It is dread. He knows the Redhorn's cruelty may be the work of Caradhras itself, or of Sauron's will riding the wind, but the choice before him is terrible either way. To turn back is to risk the ring in the open wild. To turn aside is to face Isengard and Saruman's betrayal. To go forward is to descend into a place he has long feared. You can hear it in his voice when he says he does not wish to go to Moria, that he will not lead them there unless there is no other way. He means every word. And yet, even then, he does not tell them everything. Why does he not speak the word Balrog aloud? Perhaps because to most of them it would be only a name, an empty terror without shape. Perhaps because naming such an ancient shadow might give it weight in the world, draw its gaze, or crack the fragile courage of hobbits and men who have never seen the older darkness. He carries the full knowledge himself, quietly as he has carried so many hidden burdens across the centuries. All right, dim the lights, get comfortable. Let's step together into that moment at the doors of Durin, when Gandalf lays his hand upon the grey stone and speaks, "Melon." He is not just opening a gate, he is crossing a line he set for himself long ago. Every instinct, every memory of the First Age tells him to turn aside, but for the sake of the quest and the lives under his care, he walks first into the dark. In the next part of our deep dives into Middle-earth lore, we uncover what happens when the shadow he dreads finally answers from the abyss. Echoes in the halls, sensing Durin's bane. Before the fall, he walks first into the dark, and the dark answers. At once, the air changes. It is not just the absence of light, not just the weight of ancient stone pressing down from the ceiling. It is a heaviness in the breath itself, as if the very world beneath the mountains remembers pain. The hobbits feel only fear and wonder. Aragorn feels danger, but Gandalf? Gandalf feels recognition. The grey wanderer lifts his staff, and a small white flame blooms at its tip. It should be a comfort. Instead, the light seems to push against the black, like a hand against a locked door. We journey into those echoing halls at his side now, hearing what he hears, seeing what he dares not yet name. Every step of the Fellowship's boots sends faint shivers through the stone, and somewhere, far below, something old listens. The roads through Moria twist and climb, then plunge again into lower deeps. At each turning, Gandalf pauses. He does not simply choose left or right like a traveller with a map. He stands very still, head bowed, staff dimmed, as if he is tasting the air. He is not hunting for orc patrols. He is probing for a presence that feels like a wound in the world. How many centuries has it slept here, coiled in the dark like a forgotten firebrand of the First Age? We uncover the story behind the story in those quiet hesitations. The others think he is uncertain of the way, and in part, he is. But more than once, he turns from a black stare or a yawning chasm with a sharp intake of breath, as if some unseen heat has brushed his spirit. Not a heat that warms, a heat that devours. Listen to the soundscape Tolkien gives us, the oppressive silence, then the distant scrape of stone, the faint clatter far below, the occasional mutter of orc voices that come and go like bad dreams, and under it all, like a memory trying to surface, that drumbeat phrase in the book, drums, drums in the deep. Gandalf hears the pattern before anyone else. He has listened to marching hosts of Balrogs in worlds long drowned. How could he not? So when he says in that low, measured voice that he feels something far more dangerous than orcs, it is not a guess. It is confirmation. A Maya is sensing another Maya through layers of rock and shadow, the way two storm fronts can feel each other across a valley. He will not yet give it a name aloud. What would it do to the hobbits if they knew Durin's Bane might be awake and watching? Here lies the quiet heroism of this passage. Outwardly, he is the steady guide, murmuring encouragement, setting a tireless pace, even offering the occasional dry remark to ease their hearts. Inwardly, he is already calculating battlefields and last stands. Where could he hold a bridge? Where might he buy them a few more heartbeats if the worst should rise? How do you shield the fate of Middle-earth when the enemy is your own ancient kin, corrupted in the dawn of the world? All right, dim the lights, get comfortable, and imagine the moment just before everything breaks. The Fellowship pauses outside the chamber of Mazarbul. Dust lies thick. A tomb waits in the shadows. And then, from the depths, it comes at last. The first booming roll of drums, the answering clash of gongs, the roaring of many harsh voices. Whatever lives in Moria has noticed them. And in that thunder, Gandalf finally knows that the shadow he fled in memory is coming to meet him in the flesh. The first glimpse of flame, recognizing an ancient enemy. The drums grow louder, the gongs clash. The chamber of Mazarbul, with its dust and tomb and broken book, explodes into chaos as the past, quite literally, comes crashing down upon the present. They run. Swords flash in the dim. Arrows hiss from the shadows. The Fellowship staggers back through splintering doors as orcs pour in like a black tide. And that wounded cave troll heaves its bulk forward, iron-shod foot smashing stone. In the grey uproar of that retreat, stairways crumble under their heels. Great blocks of ancient dwarf work groan and fall, and we can almost feel the sickening lurch as the floor drops away beneath them. This is not a noble, ordered withdrawal. It is flight. We journey into those twisting halls with them, down narrow passages where the air grows hot and foul, across makeshift bridges where one misstep means the abyss. Behind them, arrows clatter on stone. Ahead, only more darkness. And in the midst of that terror, Gandalf is not merely shouting directions. He is listening, inwardly, to something older than Moria, older than the Third Age itself. Then comes the narrow stair. Here the Fellowship must pass in single file, hugging the wall while a black chasm waits at their side. Gandalf turns, staff raised to hold the rear. Out of the lower dark there rises first a shadow, then a glow, then a rolling wave of heat that is not just fire, but presence. He casts a word of command. The stair shudders. For a heartbeat, the shadow recoils. And then it answers. The counterstroke that slams into him is not the blind rage of a beast. It is will. It is an ancient mind wreathed in flame, striking back. Gandalf is driven to his knees. He will later say that nearly all his strength went into that single contest. In that instant, he knows. This is no troll, no demon of mere legend. This is one of his own order, a corrupted Maya, a remnant of Morgoth's wars walking the roads of the living world. The story behind the story is that Gandalf has felt a will like this before. In Valinor, when the world was young, in the echo of Beleriand's ruin, in tales of Balrogs that slew Feanor and broke the hidden city of Gondolin. The fire pressing up that stair is both physical and spiritual, a perversion of the same kind of being he himself is, a spirit of fire turned to shadow, not a servant of the secret fire, but a mockery of it. So why does he flee? Why doesn't the great wizard simply stand and fight? Because he cannot. Bound in the guise of an old man, forbidden by the valor to unleash his full might. He knows that to duel the Balrog there, on that cramped stair, would mean the Fellowship's death. One miscast word, one falling stone, and hobbits and men, and dwarf, all tumble into the abyss. So he retreats, step by step, buying time, searching with every pace for ground where he can narrow the contest to himself alone. All right, dim the lights, get comfortable for a moment, because this is the pattern interrupt. The story doesn't shout at you. The bravest figure in the Fellowship is running not from cowardice, but from memory. As we uncover in these deep dives into Middle-earth lore, the hidden centuries Gandalf carries inside him are suddenly awake. The wars of the First Age are no longer distant song. They are roaring up a stair in Moria. Let's step together into that realization. This is the moment when ancient nightmares become present reality, when the fate of Middle-earth tightens around a single, crumbling bridge that Gandalf is already choosing in his mind. And on that bridge, as we'll see next, he will finally turn to face the shadow he has known, in one way or another, since before the sun first rose. Fly, you fools. The strategy behind the stand on the bridge. And on that bridge, he is already waiting. The bridge of Khazad-dûm is not wide, not grand, not the proud highway it once was, but a narrow stone thread cast across a bottomless dark. No railings, no walls, just a single grey span over a chasm so deep that even a Maya cannot see the end of the fall. One person can stand there and hold an army, or fail and let the world pass. Gandalf knows this. He has walked many roads in many ages, and he understands terrain the way a master smith understands metal. Wide halls favour the Balrog, wings of shadow, a whip that can lash in every direction, fire that can sweep through ranks. But a single narrow point? That is a place where power can be focused, where even an ancient terror must come on step by step, with no room to circle, no room to leap past. Here one defender can truly say, "You shall not pass." So he chooses the bridge, not the great hall, not the stair, but this knife edge above the abyss. When he plants his staff and sword, he is doing more than making a dramatic stand. He is shaping the battlefield to fit his limits. Remember, he is bound in the guise of an old man, forbidden to unleash his full might as a Maya. On that narrow stone, he can pour what he is allowed to reveal into a single point, minimizing the ruin around him. If he must break the bridge to stop Durin's bane, better to drop one span than to bring the whole mountain down on the Fellowship. And then, the line we all know. Fly, you fools. It is not a scolding, it is a command decision. Run. Do not turn back. Do not try to help me. In that instant, he is a battlefield captain, not a kindly guide. He has calculated that any hesitation, any attempt to drag him from the edge, risks exactly what he fears most. The ring, and its bearer being caught in the same fall. plunging with him into that ancient dark. When he shouts, he is really saying, "Do not waste my choice." There is an emotional cost braided into that shout. Gandalf is not only risking his life, he is accepting that his long, hidden centuries of wanderings may end here, on a crumbling bridge in a forgotten dwarf city. All the quiet counsels, the deep dives into Middle-earth lore, the patient tending of small hopes in small hearts, Bilbo, Frodo, the Shire itself, might culminate in one final act of blocking an ancient fire spirit. And his fear in this moment? It is not simply fear of pain or ending. It is fear for the fate of Middle-earth if the ring is lost with him. If Sauron's master weapon vanishes into Moria's depths with no guardian left to oppose it. That is why he stands. That is why he falls. And when we journey into what happens after that fall, we uncover just how far beyond death this choice will carry him. Words of power and cracking stone. The duel begins. So we pause on that knife edge of choice with Gandalf's fear laid bare, and then the world narrows to a single span of stone. The rest of the Fellowship has fled into the dark. The drums are fading, and on that broken road above the abyss, two ancient spirits finally stand face to face. The Balrog comes first, as sound and shadow, a weight of dread, the hammer of its steps, the red bloom of fire beneath vast wings of darkness. This is no mere beast of the deep. This is one of Morgoth's forgotten captains, a terror from an older age when whole kingdoms fell in a single night. And against it, small and alone, stands the grey wanderer, staff in one hand, Glamdring in the other, cloak whipping in the furnace wind. He does not begin with a blow. He begins with a name. I am a servant of the secret fire, wielder of the flame of Anor. Not a boast, not a flourish, but a line drawn in the very fabric of the world. When he speaks of the secret fire, he is aligning himself with the creative flame of Eru, the holy fire that kindled the music at the dawn of time. When he claims the flame of Anor, he is calling on the unsullied light of the sun, not the corrupted fire that cloaks this demon. In that instant, we uncover the story behind the story. This is not fire against fire. It is purpose against perversion. Gandalf is warning the Balrog, yes, but he is also warning the abyss itself. You shall not pass. It is a command, a boundary, a refusal that reaches beyond his frail, grey body to the authority that sent him. Remember, as an Istar, he is forbidden to dominate by sheer power. So what happens when he plants his staff and speaks as if law? How far can he lean into what he truly is without breaking the rules that bind him? Then word becomes deed. Staff strikes stone. The bridge does not merely crack, it fails as if the world itself has agreed with him. This is will made visible, an act of focused power channeled through a body never meant to bear such strain. We journey into one of the rare moments where Gandalf stops holding back. The price is immediate. His staff shatters in his hand, light snuffed, and for a heartbeat he sags, as though the years of his wanderings have all descended at once. Even to break a narrow span of stone beneath a mire of shadow nearly tears his incarnate form apart. Can you feel how close that was to the edge? The Balrog plunges, roaring, fire and shadow torn downward into the chasm. Victory. But it is a victory with a hook in it. The whip lashes up, coils his legs, and in a spray of broken rock, Gandalf is wrenched from the bridge and hurled into the dark. As he falls, the Fellowship thinks the story ends here. It does not. Dim the lights, get comfortable, because when we step together into that abyss with him, we uncover a struggle that will reach beyond death, beyond time, into the hidden centuries behind Gandalf the White. Falling through fire and darkness, beyond the edge of the story. He falls. Stone and light and air rip past in a single grey blur, and the roar of the Balrog's flame becomes the whole world. For the Fellowship, the story breaks off at a scream and a chasm. But for Gandalf, the story behind the story is only beginning. They do not simply drop like stones and wait for the end. Gandalf himself will later tell Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli that they fell far beneath the living roots of the world, that the abyss was not empty but filled with ledges and tunnels and black waters, and that they fought as they fell from the uttermost deeps back up to the peak of Zirak-Zigil. Days, not minutes, not even hours. Days of falling, climbing, pursuing, and being pursued. All right, dim the lights, get comfortable. Because when we journey into that fall, we are no longer in the familiar third age of hobbits and inns and firelit halls. We are touching an ancient war. Gandalf is a Lorin again, a Maya stripped down to his core, grappling with another Maya that once marched beneath the banners of Morgoth. This is not a wizard versus a monster. It is spirit against spirit, memory against memory. Imagine those hidden caverns where no dwarf delved and no elf ever sang. There are lakes that never saw the sun, pillars older than Khazad-dûm, and roads of broken fire where the Balrog once fled the ruin of Beleriand. In those places the battle is not only Glamdring against a fiery sword, it is light against fire, the white-blue flare of the secret fire in Gandalf's hand, straining against the corrupted flame that once answered to Morgoth's will. Every clash shakes stone. Every word of power drains his incarnate strength. And it does not stop. That is what we forget. This is not a brief, cinematic duel on a narrow bridge. It is an extended contest that pushes both of these ancient beings to the edge of what their chosen bodies can endure. Gandalf's old man's form can tire, can bleed, can break. The Balrog's fire can gutter, its form can be battered and diminished. Who yields first? Who missteps in the dark? Here Gandalf is beyond all aid. No eagles wheel overhead, no Fellowship watches in horror. There is only rock, shadow, and the dull red glare of his enemy. His fear and his resolve are entirely interior, sustained not by applause or hope of rescue, but by that quiet allegiance he named on the bridge, servant of the secret fire. When he stands against the Balrog in some lightless vault, is he not also standing once more against the echo of Morgoth himself? And this is the pattern interrupt of his long wanderings. After centuries of walking roads and whispering counsel, he is thrown back into the raw, first age mode of being. The memories he tried to leave in the West are reawakened. The fall of Gondolin, the screams on the ice of the Helcaraxi, the sight of Balrogs hewing through the hosts of the Valar, compressed now into a single terrible pilgrimage from the roots of the world to a lonely mountain peak. By the time Gandalf and the Balrog burst out onto Zirak-Zigil, they are both nearly spent. But the fate of Middle-earth will hinge on what happens in that last freezing, sky-lit round, and on what breaks inside Gandalf when the fire finally goes out. Death of the Grey. Why Gandalf truly dies high above the world, on the knife edge of Ziraxagil, the storm finally goes silent. The wind dies. The last embers gutter. And there, on that lonely peak between cloud and snow, Gandalf and the Balrog come to the end of their ancient road. He tells us later, in words that sound almost too strange to be true. He strayed out of thought and time, and his body lay destroyed on the mountain top. Not fallen, not merely unconscious, destroyed. The grey pilgrim who entered Moria does not walk away from this battle. He does not limp down the mountain, staff in hand, with a few new scars and a good story. And this is crucial. It is not metaphor. When Gandalf speaks of being naked and of wandering far, far beyond the circles of the world, he is describing what happens when an incarnate Maya is pushed past the limits placed upon him. His flesh, the old man guise the Valar wrapped him in, is spent. The vessel breaks under the strain of matching a Balrog, another Maya of fire and shadow, driven to its last reserves. Remember what we uncovered earlier about his mission. The Istari are forbidden to reveal their full majesty, forbidden to dominate wills or to wage open godlike war. They must move in patience and persuasion, walking roads among the weak and the weary. Gandalf has honoured that for centuries, but on Ziraxagil, in the thin, freezing air, he spends every allowed ounce of power, every breath of that hidden fire he bears, to cast down Durin's bane, and it kills him. This is how we know his fear in Moria was real. When he faces the Balrog on the bridge and cries, "You cannot pass," he is not playing a role. He is not a safe, untouchable guardian staging a dramatic stand. The Balrog is fully capable of destroying his embodied presence, of unhousing the spirit that once walked in the gardens of Irmo in the Blessed Realm. The ruined body on Ziraxagil is proof written in blood and ash that the stakes were not theatrical. They were mortal. Thematically, this is the end of something vast. Gandalf the Grey's original commission, to wander, to counsel, to kindle courage in the free peoples, reaches its limit here. He has guarded the ring-bearer through the dark, held the bridge, pursued the terror into the deeps and up to the snows, and finally broken it so that the Fellowship, and with them the fate of Middle-earth, might go on. His mission, as defined when he stepped off that ancient ship in the Grey Havens, is fulfilled in sacrifice. So what happens when the mission ends? If the Valar forbade open domination, why is this fallen Maya sent back, brighter and more terrible as Gandalf the White? In what way has his role changed, and who exactly overruled the rules? Dim the lights? Get comfortable, because in the next part we journey into that mystery and the story behind the story of his return. Sent back, Gandalf the White and the breaking of the limits. So when Gandalf says in that hushed conversation in Lothlorien that he strayed out of thought and time and was sent back until his task is done, we are hearing something almost no one in Middle-earth ever hears. A Maya describing his own death and recall. Not a metaphor, not a dream, a dismissal from the circles of the world, and then a command to return. He does not name the power that sends him. He speaks only of being naked on the mountaintop, of lying on the peak of Ziraxagil, until he is found. But behind those few grey words, we uncover a staggering implication. The Valar had once laid down strict terms for the Istari. No open displays of overwhelming force, no domination of wills, no ruling as war kings. If those terms are now revised, who has the authority to overrule them but the Vala themselves, or the one beyond them, the source of the secret fire Gandalf serves? When he returns, he is no longer Gandalf the Grey Wanderer, half tolerated at councils and brushed aside by Saruman's pride. He is white. In Tolkien's Legendarium, that is not a costume change. It is a transfer of office. The authority and spiritual rank that Saruman had abused is taken from him and given to the one who did not seek it. Not a mere promotion, not simply a power-up, but the story behind the story of who now stands at the centre of the fate of Middle-earth. You can hear it in his voice at Fangorn when he reveals himself to Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli. The same warmth, the same twinkle, but under it a new clarity, a terrible brightness. As head of the Order in truth, he can now act with a freedom the Grey Pilgrim never possessed. He still refuses tyranny. He will not seize the ring. He will not set himself up as a new lord. Yet he is no longer bound to quite the same hiddenness. He can break Saruman's staff in open judgment, ride at the head of the Rohirrim, stand before the Witch King and forbid his advance. The leash has been lengthened, and all of this flows from that ancient battle in the dark. By facing a corrupted Maya, one of Morgoth's own fire spirits, and pursuing it from the bridge of Khazad-dûm to the peak of Zirac-Sigil, Gandalf embraces the full cost of his mission. He gives his life not in domination, but in self-emptying service, expending every hidden measure of strength to protect a handful of frightened travelers on forgotten roads beneath the world. How else could he be trusted with Saruman's white mantle if he had not first cast himself down into shadow for the sake of others? Imagine the Third Age without that fall and return. No white rider breaking like dawn upon the Pelennor. No voice to rouse Theoden from ancient despair. No captain in grey and white to weave together Rohan, Gondor, and the scattered free peoples into one last desperate stand. Does the ring ever reach Mount Doom if Gandalf remains only the Grey, still constrained, still overshadowed by Saruman's authority? And yet, even as Gandalf the White strides more openly through the world, there is a hidden cost, a deep change in how he sees time, death, and victory itself. Because on that mountain, beyond thought and time, he has learned something that will shape every choice he makes from now on. What did he see there? And how does that vision guide his final moves against Sauron? In the next part, we journey into that revelation, and the quiet, terrifying knowledge Gandalf brings back from the edge of the world. Fear transformed. How Moria changes. Gandalf's relationship to power. And when he comes back from that edge, everything is different. Not his face, not his staff, not even the familiar grey humour that will peek through again, but the way he now stands in the world, the way he bears power. In Moria, Gandalf the Grey moved with a deep, deliberate caution. He hushes the hobbits, warns against needless words, dreads the drumbeats in the deep. He knows that one rash spell, one proud display, could wake an ancient terror and doom the Fellowship in a single heartbeat. His fear there is focused, precise. It is the fear of a commander who knows exactly how thin the line is between survival and catastrophe. All right, dim the lights, get comfortable, because when we journey into the later chapters, we uncover a transformed figure. At Helm's Deep, Gandalf the White rides out at dawn like a breaking storm. No more shrinking from open display, no more hiding his strength behind muttered counsel. He arrives with Erkenbrand and a host of riders, and the enemy breaks like a grey wave on rock. At Minas Tirith he does not merely advise. He commands the defence, rides the walls, drives back the Nazgul with a blaze of white light. The same Maya who once ran from the Balrog now rides straight toward the Witch King. What changed? It is not that the fear is gone. It has been transfigured. In Moria, Gandalf faces the worst his mission could demand, a direct, naked clash of ancient spirits, Maya against Maya, echoing wars from a forgotten age when Balrogs strode the battlefields of Beleriand. He dies. He passes out of thought and time, and then he is sent back, not as an experiment, but as a confirmation. He has gone to the far limit of his charge and returned. So when later crises come, he stands with a steadiness that feels almost unshakable because he has already walked through the fire. Listen to how he speaks now. At Orthanc, he breaks Saruman's staff with a word and casts him from the Order, speaking with a terrible, calm authority. In the high halls of Minas Tirith, he meets Denethor's despair not with pleading, but with rebuke. This is not your final say, steward. At the city gate before the Witch King he does not flinch, even when prophecy and terror gather in one black-crowned figure. Does he know he might fall again? Yes, but he also knows what it means to fall and be raised. And yet the memory of Moria never becomes pride. It is a scar. He knows how close he came to failing, how much it costs to gain this new white mantle, how little of it was his own doing. That knowledge keeps him humble, keeps him gentle with hobbits and wary of dominion, even as his visible might grows. His fear was never cowardice. It was clarity about the true scale of the enemy and the fragility of the free peoples. Facing the Balrog is the crucible where that clarity is tested and proved, and where his courage is finally tempered for the fate of Middle-earth. So what does a scarred, newly empowered Gandalf choose to do with that authority? And why does he still refuse the ring when it is offered again? In the next part, we step together into that decision. The Balrog, as mirror, what Durin's Bane reveals about Gandalf. And here is the uncomfortable truth. When Gandalf steps onto the bridge of Khazad-dûm, he is not only facing a monster in the deep, he is facing a version of himself that might have been. Not a mere beast of flame, not simply a terror from a forgotten age, but a dark mirror held up to an ancient spirit in grey. Both Gandalf and Durin's Bane began in the same dawn. Before the shaping of the world, before the long roads of the First Age, they were Maiar, lesser Ainur, attendants at the music of creation. One walked in the gardens of Lorien, learning pity and patience. The other marched beneath Morgoth's iron crown, learning domination and fear. When we journey into this confrontation, we uncover not just a clash of powers, but the story behind the story of what a Maya chooses to become. Gandalf bears Narya, the Ring of Fire, meant to kindle courage and resist despair. The Balrog is also a spirit of fire, but twisted. Its flame is whip and weapon used to sear, to break wills, to drive armies in panic across battlefields long buried in shadow. Here fire itself becomes a fork in the road. Will it warm the lost and light hidden paths, or will it scorch and enslave? Gandalf knows both possibilities live within the same spiritual nature. So when he whispers, a Balrog is come, why does his voice tremble? Part of that dread is memory. Echoes of Gondolin's fall, of Feanor struck down, of cities broken under fiery wings. But part of it is self-knowledge. He knows that the wise are always walking a narrow ledge over a chasm of power, without restraint. He has seen Saruman step off that ledge. Saruman too was a Maya, wise in craft and lore. He chose engines, machinery, the will to order the world according to his own design. Not a servant of the secret fire, but a servant of his own imagined perfection. Is that path really so distant from a Balrog's? One commands factories instead of battle hosts, smoke instead of flame, but the route is the same: control at any cost. And if Saruman could fall, could Gandalf? All right, dim the lights, get comfortable, because this is where the fate of Middle-earth tightens. On that bridge, Gandalf's choice is laid bare. He could unleash more of his hidden might, seize power openly, become a warlord in white fire. Instead, he spends himself. He breaks the bridge, not the world. He accepts death rather than reach for greater dominion. In that sense, his victory over the Balrog is also a victory over the possibility of becoming like it. He passes through flame and darkness, dies, and is sent back, not because he grasped more, but because he refused to. And that refusal will shape what he does with his new authority next. So when Gandalf the White returns, what has truly changed, and what temptation still lingers in his heart? Without Moria, no Minas Tirith, the hidden chain of consequences. What has changed is not merely his colour or even the range of his power. What has changed is how all those long, grey wanderings suddenly lock into place, like ancient gears finally engaging. If we journey into the later battles of the Third Age without Moria in mind, we miss the story behind the story. For nearly 2,000 years before that fall, Gandalf walks the roads of Middle-earth, drinking in languages, customs and fears. He sits in Meduseld with kings whose grandfathers he advised. He shares counsel with Elrond and Galadriel, laughs with hobbits by quiet hearths, and listens to the worries of captains in Minas Tirith. Statement, time span, consequence. And for centuries, long before Theoden or Denethor are born, he is patiently weaving trust. So when he comes later with wild news of a returned shadow, when he says to Rohan, "Ride now," and to Gondor, "Light the beacons," they listen. Not because a stranger demands it, but because an old friend, tested in 100 hidden crises, has earned the right to be believed. All right, dim the lights, get comfortable. Let's step together into the moment when that trust meets his deepest lore. Gandalf has studied the ancient ages, the fall of Gondolin, the terror of Morgoth's hosts, the nature of Balrogs as corrupted Maiar. He knows what it means to face one of these spirits of fire because, in a sense, he remembers that age in his very being. That is why, in Moria, he tries first to flee, to bar the door, to avoid open confrontation. He is not a glory seeker. He is a strategist who knows that if he falls too soon, the fate of Middle-earth unravels. But when there is no other road, he spends himself. He dies. And then the pattern shifts. Sent back as Gandalf the White, he returns not merely stronger, but authorized. Saruman's corruption has left a vacuum among the Astari. Someone must bear the white mantle in truth. Only one who has passed through fire and shadow without grasping for dominion can now unseat Saruman's influence among the free peoples. Without that transformation, could Theoden have thrown off the grey web of despair? Could the Ents have marched without a trustworthy white wizard to expose Isengard's treachery? Watch how the payoffs ripple. At Helm's Deep, the White Rider appears on the ridge at dawn, and the Rohirrim do not question him. Centuries of alliance building crash into that single radiant charge. In Minas Tirith, when Denethor sinks into madness, it is Gandalf's moral and spiritual strength, tempered in Moria, that holds the city's heart against utter collapse. And from the very beginning, his quiet guidance of Bilbo and then Frodo is coloured by what he knows of ancient powers, of rings of spirits like the Balrog and himself. Without Moria, there is no white wizard to counter Saruman, no unified West, no last desperate stand at the walls of Minas Tirith. The fall and rise in Moria are not a side quest. They are the hidden foundation under every later victory. But if that's true, what unseen hand was arranging that terrible encounter in the dark? And how far back does that design really go? Rereading the bridge, Gandalf's fear as the key to his greatness. So now, with that in mind, go back with me to the bridge of Khazad-dûm. In the grey roar of drums and flame, in that narrow span over the abyss, we are not watching an old man bark defiance at a nameless monster. We are watching one Maya, cloaked in weakness, confront another Maya, unchained and terrible in a duel that reaches back to the First Age. Dim the lights, get comfortable, and replay it in your mind. Gandalf stands there, staff and sword in hand, but behind those worn eyes live memories of ancient wars. Balrogs surging through the smoke of Thangorodrim, Feanor falling beneath their whips, the hidden city of Gondolin in flames as a fire demon bursts through the gates. He knows what walks in that shadow. He knows its master, its world-breaking lineage, the centuries of ruin that follow in a Balrog's wake. So when he turns and runs, driving the Fellowship onward, that is not cowardice. That is informed terror. He has been forbidden by the Valar to match Sauron with open power. He wears the body of an old man. He can die. He has walked the hidden roads of Middle-earth for 2,000 years, precisely not to fight wars like those again. Of course he fears. How could he not? And yet, on that bridge, we uncover the heart of his greatness. Not in fearlessness, but in the choice he makes while afraid. He cannot defeat this thing in a way that saves both himself and his companions. He understands, almost at once, that the price of their escape will be his own life. So he spends what little he is allowed to wield in the one configuration that will work: a narrow bridge, a single stand, a breaking of stone that sends them both into the dark. Not a glorious duel of blazing power, but a precise, sacrificial move. This is the story behind the story. Those long wanderings through Bree and the Shire, the quiet council in Rivendell, the deep dives into Middle-earth lore at Minas Tirith's archives, the patient strengthening of hearts with Narya, all of it flowers here, in a single shouted, "You shall not pass," that gathers 2 millennia of preparation into one act he always hoped to avoid. For 2,000 years he walked as the Grey Pilgrim so that, in this one moment, the ring-bearer could go on. Let's step together into the emotional core of that. Gandalf is a being of light, a servant of the secret fire, who accepts grey robes and an old back so that others can shine instead. He feels the ancient fear of Morgoth's terror rise in him, and he walks toward it. He goes where the fear is greatest, not because he trusts in his own strength, but because he trusts that the fate of Middle-earth is better served by 9 frightened companions stumbling into the sunlight than by one Maya, clinging to his life in the dark. And when he falls, and the world thinks him gone, that is not the end of the design we've been tracing. It is the threshold. Could Gandalf have survived without dying? An open question. It is the threshold, and thresholds invite questions. If Gandalf had not fallen, if he had unleashed everything from the very first moment on the bridge of Khazad-dûm, could he have cast down the Balrog and walked out of Moria alive? Or, given who he was and how he was sent, was some form of death always waiting for him in that grey chasm? To even ask this, we journey into the strange tension at the heart of Gandalf's being. He is Olorin, a Maya of the same order as the Balrog, born before the making of the world, who once walked in the gardens of Lorien and learned pity and patience from Nienna. Yet in Middle-earth he is an old man with aching bones, forbidden by the Valar to reveal his full majesty or to rule by fear. Not a mere wanderer, not simply a wizard, but an immortal spirit deliberately wrapped in weakness. So what happens when that restrained fire meets one of Morgoth's ancient scourges face to face? One line of interpretation says this: he could have done more, but he would not. His restraint in Moria is moral and mission-bound. The Istari are sent not to dominate wills or to match Sauron and his servants in naked power, but to awaken courage in others. If Gandalf turns Khazad-dûm into another battlefield of the First Age, if he tears open the ancient stone with Maya might, does he betray the very strategy of smallness that led him to trust hobbits and broken kings? In this view, he holds back because he must, because the story behind the story is that victory bought at the price of becoming a new terror would not be victory at all. But there is another reading, colder and more physical. His body can break. Tolkien is clear. After the fall and the long battle up Zirak-Sigil, Gandalf dies. His spirit leaves his form, and only the direct intervention of a higher power sends him back. That suggests a hard limit. This incarnate shape, this grey pilgrim, simply cannot channel the full blaze of a Maya without burning out the vessel. Even if he had hurled all his power at Durin's bane in the first instant, would the result have been any different, save that he died sooner, perhaps with the Fellowship still trapped in the dark? Tolkien leaves us hints, but not a final answer. We know Balrogs once slew Feanor and ravaged Gondolin. We know Gandalf is a servant of the secret fire, aligned with a deeper flame than theirs. Yet the text never settles the duel's what-ifs. That uncertainty is a gift. It lets us weigh what we've uncovered about Maiar, about the Istari's hidden constraints, about the long shadow of Morgoth, and ask, was this fall a tragic accident or part of a design that required Gandalf the Grey to be spent, so Gandalf the White could rise? All right, dim the lights, get comfortable for a moment. As we step together into the next part of this journey, hold that question with you. When we talk about what comes after the fall, we'll circle back, and I'd like you to be ready to add your voice to this debate in the comments, to carry this reflection down your own roads through Middle-earth. From the Grey Havens to the bridge of Khazad-dûm. A final look back. So we hold that question in the quiet for a moment, and we look back, because to understand what was truly spent on that bridge of Khazad-dûm, we have to remember where the road began. In the grey mists off the coast, at the very edge of the world, when an ancient ship slid into the havens and a small bent figure stepped ashore. On that day at the Grey Havens, around the year 1000 of the Third Age, Círdan the shipwright looked into Gandalf's weary eyes, and against all expectation, pressed Narya into his hand. Not Saruman's, not the one who loved power and devices. The Ring of Fire went to the Grey Wanderer who feared domination more than defeat. In that quiet transfer, we uncover the story behind the story. A mission not of blazing conquest, but of kindling courage in a fading age. From there the roads multiply. Gandalf walks to Imladris and finds in Elrond a mind that remembers the First Age and the ancient wars against Morgoth. He crosses the mountains and speaks with Galadriel beneath the golden boughs of Lorien, and an unspoken alliance of ring-bearers is born. Not a council of generals, but of stewards, of those who will resist the shadow without claiming the world for themselves. And for nearly 2,000 years, before a hobbit named Frodo ever stepped beyond the Shire, Gandalf moves through the hidden centuries, mapping the rising darkness. He watches Greenwood turn to Mirkwood. He infiltrates Dol Guldur and feels behind the necromancer the old, familiar malice of Sauron. He kneels beside a broken dwarf king in that same fortress and receives a key and a map that will send Thorin Oakenshield to Erebor. He lingers in inns and on doorsteps, learning the names and habits of hobbits, until he becomes certain that the fate of Middle-earth may rest on those who do not seek greatness at all. All the while he remembers, because Gandalf is not only an old man, he is a Lorin, a Maya from before the making of the world, and somewhere in the deep places of his memory lie the Balrogs, fire spirits of his own order, corrupted by Morgoth, who helped burn Beleriand and topple Gondolin. When he hears in the dark of Moria the word Durin's Bane, he is not imagining a nameless beast. He is recalling an age when such beings strode across battlefields like living volcanoes, when even the greatest of the Eldar fell before their whips and swords. That is why he runs. Not from cowardice, but from clear knowledge. He has been forbidden to meet Sauron's power with open force. He wears the frailty of an old man like armour and chain. If he falls, there is no second Istar waiting in the wings to gather hobbits and dwarves and men into one fragile fellowship. So, on the endless stairs of Moria, every step he takes is weighed against 2 millennia of preparation. How much can he risk? How much must he spend? And when he turns at last upon the narrow bridge, staff raised, cloak whipping in the furnace wind, that moment is not an isolated flash of heroism. It is the culmination of every quiet choice. To walk beside hobbits instead of kings, to counsel patience instead of conquest, to trust that the secret fire works most deeply through the small and the willing. He names himself there in the roar and the falling stone, servant of the secret fire. Not master of it, not wielder for his own glory, servant. So his greatest victory comes not in driving the Balrog down, but in letting himself go with it, in accepting a fall that may mean his final unmaking, if that is what the music requires. And as we journey into what happens beyond that fall, the white figure on the mountaintop, the returned messenger, there is one last question we need to carry with us. When a Maya dies and is sent back, who or what has decided that the story is not yet finished? Your turn around the fire. Share, subscribe, and journey on. And as we sit with that mystery, this is where you come in, around our little digital fire. We have walked the bridge with Gandalf, felt the heat of that ancient shadow, watched him choose to fall. Now it's your turn to speak. Do you think he could have survived the Balrog without dying if he had fought differently, or fled sooner, or called on some hidden reserve of power? And knowing now that both were Maya, that this was the clash of two ancient spirits rather than wizard and beast, what does his fear mean to you? Dim the lights, get comfortable, and imagine the comments not as a scrolling wall of text, but as voices around the same circle. One from New Zealand in the grey hours before dawn, one from Brazil at midnight, one from India in the bright heat of afternoon, one from a quiet room in the United States, long after everyone else has gone to bed. Different time zones, different ages, different roads behind you, all gathered around the same story behind the story. When you leave your thoughts below, tell us where in the world you're watching from and what image stays with you most. The fire on the bridge, the fall into the abyss, or the white figure returned at the end of all wanderings. We journey into these tales together, and your interpretations, your questions, even your disagreements become part of the fate of Middle-earth as we explore it here. If you'd like more long-form, cinematic deep dives into Middle-earth lore like this, that's where the simple things help in a very unsimple way. A like tells the strange and ancient spirits of the algorithm that you want more hidden histories, more quiet character journeys, more nights spent tracing the hidden centuries behind a single line of dialogue. A subscription is you saying, yes, keep the fire lit, keep the stories coming. Because this is only one chapter. From here we uncover other shadows and other lights. We'll step together into the legend of the Witch King and ask how a mortal king became the terror of the Third Age. We'll return to the fall of Gondolin, where Balrogs once strode openly and the world itself seemed to crack. We may even follow the forgotten roads and the blue wizards into the far east, where the texts fall silent and we are left to wonder what became of them. So as you pause, maybe to type a comment or tap that grey button to turn it white, hold one last image in your mind. The bridge of Khazad-dûm now stands empty. No company, no Balrog, no grey pilgrim, only stone, and the faint echo of a staff striking rock, still trembling somewhere in the deep places of the world. The shadow has passed from that narrow span, but the story has not ended. The road of stories goes ever on from here, and will be waiting further down the path. Appendix 1. Timeline of Gandalf's pre-LotR journeys. So let's pull the camera back from that empty bridge and look at the whole road that led there. The battle with Durin's Bane is not an isolated scene. It is the crest of a long grey wave that has been building for almost 2,000 years. To see why Gandalf feared the Balrog, we have to see where he has been, what he has seen, and how the shadow has moved while he walked. The year is around T.A. Mill. The Third Age is old, and the great victories over Sauron have faded into half-remembered legend. Into this world comes Olorin in the guise of Gandalf the Grey, stepping ashore at the Grey Havens. Círdan, perceiving more than others, gives him Narya, the Ring of Fire, to strengthen hearts against despair. Not a warlord, not a king, but a quiet wanderer, already set apart from his fellow Istari by a hidden flame he carries into the world. From there, the centuries begin to unspool. Gandalf journeys into Eriador and beyond, learning the tongues of men, elves and dwarves, sitting by small hearths and in ancient halls. He comes early to Rivendell, where Elrond recognizes in him a power and a humility that echo the West. In Lorien, Galadriel tests him and trusts him, and an unspoken fellowship of ring-bearers is formed. Long before Bilbo is born, the fate of Middle-earth is already being quietly discussed in lamplit chambers while the rain falls outside. Around TA 2060, a new shadow rises in Greenwood the Great. By 2063, Gandalf dares the stronghold of the necromancer at Dol Guldur, and the dark power withdraws, beginning the watchful peace. For nearly 4 centuries, the world breathes easier, while Gandalf walks forgotten roads, watching, listening, suspecting that this is not the end. When the shadow returns in 2460, he is ready with questions the others do not want to ask. The White Council forms around 2463. Elrond, Galadriel, Saruman, and Gandalf gather to consider the growing darkness. Saruman takes the chair. Gandalf takes the road. Again and again he urges action against Dol Guldur, and again he is overruled. During these same centuries, his visits to the Shire become more frequent. Why such interest in a quiet corner of the world? Because in their humility and resilience, he uncovers a living answer to the ring's corruption. In 2850, Gandalf secretly re-enters Dol Guldur. There he finds Thrain, broken and dying, learns that one of the 7 dwarf rings has been taken, and discovers beyond doubt that the necromancer is Sauron himself. This is the story behind the story of The Hobbit. From that prison cell, with a map and a key pressed into his hand, Gandalf begins to weave a plan that will remove Smaug from the north and deny Sauron a dragon ally. So, in 2941, the quest of Erebor unfolds. Gandalf nudges Thorin toward Bilbo, guides the company through trolls and goblins, then slips away to drive Sauron from Dol Guldur with the White Council. The Battle of 5 Armies reshapes the north. Erebor is reclaimed, Dale reborn, and Smaug destroyed. While armies clash beneath the lonely mountain, Gandalf is already thinking of Mordor. From 2941 to 31, his focus tightens. He watches Bilbo. He probes the ring. He studies ancient scrolls in Minas Tirith and rides often to the Shire, that land of the halflings that most consider beneath notice. Around 2989 to 3001, his unease hardens into fear. Is Bilbo's ring the one? Could the shadow he once met in Dol Guldur now be reaching for it? And all through these centuries, Moria sits in the back of his mind, like a closed door. He knows of Durin's bane from dwarven whispers and elvish laments, from old tales of Balrogs that once strode blazing across battlefields in the First Age. When he warns against the road through Khazad-dûm in 3018, it is not sudden panic. It is the weight of 3 ages of memory. So by the time the Fellowship stands at the west gate of Moria, everything we have traced is already behind his eyes. The arrival at the Havens, the White Council's delays, Dol Guldur's secrets, Smaug's fall, the ring's slow unveiling. The hidden centuries of his wanderings have taught him exactly what waits in the deep. And still, for the sake of 8 companions and the fate of Middle-earth, he goes in. Hold that timeline in your mind, because in the next part we'll slow it down again and look at one more hidden layer. Not where Gandalf walked, but who he really was beneath the grey cloak, and why facing a Balrog meant facing his own ancient reflection. Appendix 2. Sources, canon, and careful speculation. So before we journey into Gandalf's inner nature and that ancient reflection in the fire, we should pause and lay our cards on the table. When we talk about Maya, about Balrogs, about what might have passed between them in the dark, where are we standing on firm rock? And where are we carefully stepping out over the grey mists of speculation? Our primary roads are clear. The backbone of this episode is the Lord of the Rings itself, especially the Bridge of Khazad-dûm. Gandalf's later accounts in The White Rider and Many Partings, and the brief, piercing comments in the appendices. Around that, we weave the Silmarillion for the ancient wars of Beleriand and the fall of Gondolin, unfinished tales for the missions and limits of the Istari, and Tolkien's letters, particularly those where he clarifies what the wizards are and how they may act in the world. From these, some things are not speculation at all, but simple textual fact. Gandalf, or Lorin, is a Maya. Durin's Bane is also a Maya, a Balrog corrupted by Morgoth in the First Age. Balrogs fought at the side of their Dark Lord in ancient battles, helped bring down kingdoms like Gondolin, and were believed by the end of that age to be destroyed or hidden. The dwarves of Khazad-dûm awoke this Balrog in their deep delvings, and Gandalf truly dies after their battle and is sent back, changed as Gandalf the White. All of that is the story behind the story, written in ink, not in guesswork. Where we move beyond the printed line is in the links between those facts. When we imagine Gandalf's memories of Morgoth's terror stirring as he senses the Balrog, when we frame their clash as a meeting of two ancient colleagues turned enemies, or when we infer the flavour of their unseen battle beneath the roots of the world, those are reconstructions. They are informed by Tolkien's metaphysics of the Ainur, by his descriptions of the secret fire and corrupted fire, but they are still bridges we build between distant textual shores. Our guiding rule in these deep dives into Middle-earth lore is restraint. We avoid power scaling that turns Gandalf into a caped demigod, or the Balrog into a video game boss. We respect the constraints Tolkien himself placed on the Istari. They are forbidden to dominate wills. They must work through counsel and patience. They are clothed in genuine vulnerability. If a picture of their power does not fit within that frame, we set it aside. There are, honestly, places where the shadow remains. How exactly does Gandalf's raw power compare to the Balrogs? What, in detail, happened on every ledge and staircase and peak during their long struggle from the bridge to Zirak-Zigil? Tolkien does not say, and so we will not pretend certainty. We can suggest, we can imagine, but we will also tell you where the text falls silent. So as we uncover Gandalf's ancient reflection in the fire, treat this video as the beginning of a conversation, not the last word. If you know a passage we did not mention, if you favour a different reading of a line from the Silmarillion or a letter, bring it to the comments. All right, dim the lights, get comfortable, and let's step together into who Gandalf really was, and what it meant for him to stand before a Balrog and say, "You cannot pass." Appendix 3, Fire, Light and Shadow in Tolkien's symbolism. And let's step together into who Gandalf really was, and what it meant for him to stand before a Balrog and say, "You cannot pass." To grasp that moment, we have to understand what is really burning on that bridge. Not just fire and shadow in a cavern, but two completely different kinds of flame. In Tolkien's world, fire and light go all the way back to the beginning, before the first dawn, before even the sun. In the timeless halls there is the flame imperishable, the secret fire that belongs to Eru alone, the creative spark by which the world itself is kindled into being. Later, in the blessed realm, that same life-giving light is refracted into the two trees of Valinor, silver and gold, pouring out a radiance that nourishes all things. When those trees are destroyed, the light is caught again in the Silmarils, in the last unshadowed memory of that ancient age. We journey into these deep dives into Middle-earth lore, not just for trivia, but because that same story of light and fire runs like a hidden river into the Lord of the Rings. Galadriel's phial is literally light from the Silmarils, passed through Erendil's star, given into Frodo's hand as a weapon against despair. When she says, "May it be a light to you in dark places," she is speaking the language of the secret fire. Light that heals, light that reveals, light that does not devour what it touches. Now, set that beside another image, a lidless eye rimmed with flame, wreathed in ash and blackness. Sauron's eye burns, but it does not illumine. It searches, it consumes, it dominates. Here we uncover the other side of Tolkien's symbolism, devouring fire. Morgoth, the first Dark Lord, cannot create, so he twists what already is, and many of his greatest servants are spirits of fire that he has bent to his will. The Balrogs are the most terrible of these, mire of flame, wrapped in shadow, whose burning whips and swords are described again and again as darkness made visible. This is the Balrog of Moria. Its fire does not comfort the fellowship. It throws no gentle glow on grey stone. It comes wreathed in smoke, its light strangled even as it blazes. It is a visual metaphor for power torn away from goodness, for passion unmoored from purpose, a perversion of fire. And Gandalf? He stands there as servant of the secret fire, wielder of the flame of Anor. Anna is the sun, the great heir of the two trees, the daily sign that darkness is never final. Gandalf's fire is aligned with renewal. His burning does not scorch the innocent. It steels the heart, drives back the shadow, rekindles courage on forgotten roads. When he kindles pine cones against the wargs, when his staff flares white in Moria, that is Anor's fire at work. The films and the text both know this. Watch the Moria sequence again with this in mind. Notice how often the Fellowship are framed by thin, honest light. Torches, Gandalf's staff, a glimmer on a sword, while the Balrog arrives as a mass of darkness with flame leaking out at the edges. Ask yourself, which fire gives life here and which only devours? Which belongs to the fate of Middle-earth and which is a relic of a ruined age? Because when Gandalf steps onto that bridge, it is not only courage versus terror, it is secret fire versus corrupted flame, and the next stage of their ancient conflict will carry him far beyond the abyss of Khazad-dûm. Appendix 4. Other Maya in disguise, parallels and contrasts. And it is not only that one Balrog on one bridge. Behind that clash of flames stands a whole family of ancient spirits, some fallen, some faithful, all wearing masks in the grey world of the Third Age. To understand why Gandalf trembles and yet stands firm, we journey into the wider company of the Maiar. Think first of Sauron. Not the great eye atop Barad-dûr, but Myron of old, a Maya of Aule, who once loved order, craft, and the beauty of made things. He does not fall through wild rage as the Balrogs do, but through a colder choice. He prefers domination to humility, iron discipline to patient mercy, a world hammered into shape rather than gently tended. Where the Balrog burns in destructive fire, Sauron hardens into an iron will that will not bend. And then, set beside them, this other Maya, Olorin, who walks among the children of Ilúvatar in secret, learning pity from their grief, delight from their small joys. When he comes as Gandalf, he accepts limitation, weakness, even the possibility of death. He carries Narya, the ring of fire, yet he uses that fire not to coerce, but to hearten. Not a tyrant, not a warlord, but a grey wanderer who lifts others to stand in their own strength. But the Maya are not only dark lords and grey pilgrims. High above the mountains wheel the great eagles, whose lord, Gwaihir, answers Gandalf's call again and again. Tolkien hints that such mighty eagles are more than mere beasts, that some may be spirits in feathered form, emissaries of Manwë himself. And out in the old forest there is Tom Bombadil, that baffling, singing enigma. Is he a Maya, something older, something other? Even the wise do not know, and that uncertainty reminds us how many hidden powers still walk the forgotten roads of Middle-earth. All right, dim the lights, get comfortable, because here is the pattern interrupt. The Witch King of Angmar is not a Maya at all. He is a mortal man, a king who took one of Sauron's rings of power and surrendered his will. Yet by the end he has become almost indistinguishable from his master's shadow, an instrument through which Sauron's malice moves. Mortal and immortal, they rhyme with one another in corruption. So we uncover a stark contrast. Sauron and the Balrog seize power to magnify themselves. Gandalf lays it down to serve. They descend into slavery to their own will. He chooses obedience to a higher will, the secret fire that kindles being. And for centuries across his hidden wanderings, that question haunts him. Could he too become like them if he grasped too much, pressed too hard, trusted his own wisdom above all? When he flees the Balrog in Moria, it is not only physical terror. It is the memory of his kin who chose ruin, the knowledge that the fate of Middle-earth may hinge on whether he fights as they did or in a different spirit. And on the peak of Ziraxagil, as we'll see next, that choice is tested to its uttermost limit. Appendix 5. The Balrog in Adaptations. What they get right and wrong. And on that bridge in Peter Jackson's films, we see that choice etched into every line of Gandalf's face. The camera closes in. The roar of the chasm falls away. It is not just a wizard and a monster. It is an old, grey spirit staring into an ancient terror that most of the world has forgotten. Jackson gives us an image that has become almost definitive. The Balrog, as a towering titan of shadow and fire, horned like some primeval beast, wreathed in whips of living flame. In the book, Tolkien certainly calls it a shadow and a great form of fire, and he lets us feel the heat, the darkness, the weight of that presence. But the films amplify everything, turning half-glimpsed terror into a full, cinematic reveal. The horns, the sheer size, the molten lava dripping from its body. These are not all in the text, yet they capture the right emotion. Something from a deeper age has awakened, something that does not belong in this later, fading world. Watch Gandalf on the bridge in the movie. He trembles, he shouts, he plants his staff and sword and roars, "You shall not pass," with a desperate fury. Jackson heightens the drama, stretching out the moment, making the fall feel like the climax of an age. And yet, beneath that exaggeration, the core dynamic Tolkien wrote is still there. Gandalf is afraid. He tries to flee, and then, when there is no other road, he turns and spends himself so that the others can escape. The sacrifice is the heart of the scene, and the films preserve that. Where adaptations often flatten things is in the metaphysics. On screen, the Balrog reads as a boss monster in the dungeon, an ultimate beast in the dark. Gandalf, meanwhile, is framed as a powerful but mortal wizard, a mentor in a fantasy story. The deeper truth, that this is a corrupted Maya facing a fellow Maya, that this is a clash between ancient spirits shaped before the making of the world, usually stays hidden under the visuals. We rarely hear words like Ainur or see any hint that Gandalf is, in origin, closer to the Balrog than to the hobbits he protects. And yet, the emotional truth still lands. We feel the weight of fear. We feel the cost. We glimpse, even without the theology, that the fate of Middle-earth is being decided in that narrow span of stone. So as we journey into these deep dives into Middle-earth lore, we do not need to reject the films. We can let them be what they are. Powerful retellings that emphasize feeling, while the books quietly unfold the story behind the story. So next time you watch that scene, try this. Dim the lights, get comfortable, and remember what you now know. That the monster is an echo of Morgoth's wars, that the wizard is a humbled servant of the secret fire, and that the Grey Wanderer's fear is rooted in ages you can almost, but not quite, see on screen. And then ask yourself, what really happens to him after he falls? Because that is where we uncover the next, even stranger chapter. Final embers. Carrying Gandalf's story beyond this video. So now we find ourselves at the quiet edge of the tale, where echoes fade and the last sparks of battle drift away into the dark above. Khazad-dûm. We have walked with a grey pilgrim from the mists of the grey havens to the fire of Durin's bane, and back again into the strange white light beyond death. And in that long road, we uncover something more than a wizard and a monster. Because Gandalf's story is the story behind the story of courage. Not the loud, trumpet-blaring courage of heroes on painted banners, but the worn, private courage of someone who has carried ancient fears for centuries and still chooses to stand. He remembers the First Age. He remembers Morgoth's terror and the Balrogs that broke kingdoms, and he knows exactly what waits in that shadowed chasm. When he turns on the bridge, it is not because he has no fear. It is because love for those behind him weighs more than the dread before him. And that, in a quiet way, reaches into our own world. All of us have our Moria moments. The meeting, the phone call, the diagnosis, the decision we've been dreading for years. We stand at the edge of some unseen abyss with our own long hidden burdens on our backs, and we feel the urge to run. Does that fear mean we have failed? Or does it mean we finally understand the cost? Gandalf shows us that fear is not the opposite of courage. It is the stage on which courage is born. He names himself a servant of the secret fire. We may not carry Narya. We may not be Maiar walking the forgotten roads of an ancient age. But each of us has a secret fire of our own. Convictions, promises, quiet loves we refuse to abandon. When your Balrog steps out of the dark, the question is not, am I afraid? But, what am I aligned with? In that moment, you can plant your staff, however trembling your hand, and say in your own words, you cannot pass. So as we journey into the fate of Middle-earth and beyond, Let this not end at the YouTube progress bar. Return to Tolkien's world. Reread the grey chapters in Moria. Talk with friends about why Gandalf ran and why he turned. Join us for future deep dives into Middle-earth lore as we follow his wanderings after the fall into the hidden centuries where he is remade as Gandalf the White. Thank you for walking this whole road with us, from the sea mist of the havens to the red glare beneath the mountain and back into starlight. Your time, your attention, your willingness to dim the lights, get comfortable and think deeply about an old wizard in a grey cloak. That matters. So hold one last image as the screen begins to fade. A lone grey pilgrim on a road at dusk, staff in hand, his hat bowed against the evening wind. On his finger, beneath the folds of his sleeve, a hidden ring glows faintly like a coal that will not die. He walks on into the gathering shadow, not for glory, not for songs, but so that somewhere, far away, a small house in a green land can sleep in peace. Even when this story ends, he is still out there facing the dark, so that others can live in the light.